The day my own son insisted I had forged my own memory was the day I realized betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. It comes from the people who know exactly where your trust lives. The bank called to congratulate me on signing away control of nearly $2 million in investments. I hadn't left my house that morning. Yet Ethan looked everyone in the eye and calmly said, "Mom probably forgot. Ever since her fall, her memory hasn't been the same." Then the bank manager quietly added, "Mrs. Whitmore, our security cameras recorded the entire signing. If this story touches you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please, like this video if you've ever believed that truth always finds its way to the surface. Subscribe if you enjoy emotional family stories with unexpected twists. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done if your own child accused you of something you never did? Also, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always enjoy seeing how far these stories travel around the world. For most of my life, I believed money could either protect a family or poison it. My husband, Charles, used to say that a dollar earned honestly carried peace with it, but a dollar taken in desperation carried a curse. I never forgot that, especially after he passed away. I was 69 years old when everything began to unravel, living alone in the same brick house in Columbus, Ohio, where Charles and I had raised our children. It was not a mansion, but to me it held more value than any estate on a hill. The kitchen still had the small burn mark near the stove from the year Ethan tried to make pancakes for Mother's Day. The hallway still had a faint scratch on the floor from Grace dragging her college trunk out the door when she left for Cincinnati. Every corner of that house carried proof that I had been a mother before I was anything else. Charles had been gone for 3 years. Cancer took him slowly then, all at once. Before he died, he made me promise one thing. "Aaron," he told me, squeezing my hand from that hospital bed, "don't let anybody rush you into signing anything, not even the children." At the time, I thought he was simply being cautious. Charles had spent 40 years as an insurance adjuster. He had seen too many people lose homes, savings, and dignity because someone they trusted slid the wrong paper in front of them. So, after his funeral, I honored that promise. I kept our investments managed through the same bank we had used for decades. I kept every document in order. I never signed anything without reading it twice, and I never confused love with permission. That last part became harder when Ethan's company started failing. My son, Ethan Whitmore, was 42, handsome in the polished way men become when they learn charm can open doors. He owned a small construction business called Whitmore Residential Group. For a while, he did well. He built decks, remodeled kitchens, handled small home additions around central Ohio. People liked him. He had Charles's smile, the kind that made strangers feel like old friends. But charm does not pay vendors. Charm does not cover payroll. Charm does not erase bad decisions. About a year before the bank called me, Ethan began stopping by more often than usual. At first, I was touched. He would bring coffee, fix a loose cabinet hinge, ask whether I needed help with the yard. But slowly, those visits changed. He started talking about temporary cash flow problems and short-term lending gaps. He said banks were unfair to small business owners. He said one unfinished subdivision deal had tied up everything. Then came the first request. "Mom, I'm not asking for a gift," he said one Sunday afternoon, sitting across from me at the kitchen table. "It would be an investment, a smart one, how much I asked." He looked down at his coffee. 200,000. I remember the silence after that. Even the refrigerator seemed louder. "Ethan," I said carefully, "that is not grocery money. That is part of my retirement. I know that." "No, sweetheart, I don't think you do." His face tightened. "Dad would have helped me." That sentence landed harder than he meant it to. maybe harder than he cared. I looked at him for a long moment, seeing both the little boy who used to run into my arms and the grown man who had learned where to press to make me hurt. Your father would have asked for your books first, I said. He stood up after that. He kissed my cheek, but his lips were cold. Forget, I asked. But he did not forget. Neither did I. Over the next few months, Ethan tried again in smaller ways. Could I co-sign a line of credit? Could I move some money temporarily? Could I put the house up as collateral just until a project closed? Each time I said no. Not because I didn't love him, because I did. A mother who hands her child a rope without checking whether it is tied to an anchor or a cliff is not helping. She is only pretending love means rescue. Rebecca, Ethan's wife, was always more graceful about it. She had a soft voice, careful makeup, and the calm manners of a woman who never entered a room without knowing what she wanted from it. She never demanded money directly. That was not her style. Instead, she would sit beside me at family dinners and say things like, "It must be so comforting to have security at your age," or, "Ethan just wants to keep his father's name respected." His father's name. They both knew how to use Charles when they needed to. My daughter Grace was different. Grace did not scheme. She simply believed keeping peace was more important than asking who had started the fire. She was 36, a school counselor tender-hearted to the point of blindness. Whenever Ethan and I argued, she tried to soften both sides. "Mom," she told me one evening, "Ethan is drowning. Maybe you could help without risking everything." "That is exactly what he keeps asking me to do," I replied. "He's your son, and I am his mother, not his bank." Grace sighed like I had chosen cruelty. That hurt more than I admitted. By spring, the family had begun treating my caution like a character flaw. At Sunday dinners, conversation stopped when I entered the room. Rebecca would give Ethan a look. Grace would overcompensate with bright chatter. Ethan became distant then, overly sweet, then distant again. I could feel the shape of something forming around me, invisible but tight, like a net being pulled from all sides. Still, I held my ground. I had my routines. Monday mornings, I balanced my checkbook. Wednesdays, I volunteered at the church pantry. Fridays, I called my financial advisor or reviewed statements from Franklin Union Bank. I was not confused. I was not careless. I was a widow who understood that the money Charles and I saved was not just money. It was medicine, property tax, emergency repairs, dignity, and the right not to beg my children for help later. Then came the morning, everything changed. It was a gray Tuesday. Rain tapped softly against the kitchen window while I sorted old receipts into envelopes. I remember the smell of lemon tea beside me. I remember the clock reading 10:17. I remember because afterward I replayed every tiny detail, trying to prove to myself that the world had been normal right before it split open. The phone rang. "Mrs. Whitmore?" a woman asked. "This is Olivia Bennett, branch manager at Franklin Union Bank." Yes, there was a pause. Not long, but long enough for my hand to tighten around the receiver. "I'm calling regarding the investment transfer authorization completed this morning." I frowned. "What transfer authorization?" Another pause. "The document transferring control of your Whitmore legacy investment account into a joint management structure with Ethan Whitmore." For a moment, I did not understand the words. They floated there formal and clean, hiding something filthy underneath. "I'm sorry," I said slowly. "You must have the wrong account." "I have your account in front of me, Mrs. Whitmore. I didn't sign any document." Silence. Then Olivia's voice lowered. "The paperwork bears your signature." My tea had gone cold beside me. "That is impossible. I have been home all morning." "Mrs. Whitmore, are you certain?" That question changed the temperature of the room. Of course, I'm certain. She asked if anyone else had access to my personal documents. She asked whether I had recently authorized Ethan to act on my behalf. She asked whether I could come to the bank immediately. By noon, Ethan was standing in my living room claiming he had no idea why I was upset. "Mom," he said, holding up both hands, "I didn't forge anything." I never said that word. His eyes flickered. It was the smallest movement, barely there. But a mother knows when her child reacts to a truth before it is spoken. Rebecca arrived 10 minutes later, dressed as if she had been expecting an emergency meeting all along. Grace came too flushed and worried, asking me to stay calm. Stay calm. Those two words often mean make your pain easier for everyone else to watch. I told them what Olivia had said. I told them I had not gone to the bank. I told them someone had used my name. Ethan listened with an expression so controlled, it frightened me. Then he said gently, almost sadly, "Mom, you did have that fall last winter." I stared at him. "What?" "You hit your head on the porch steps. The doctor said memory issues could happen. The doctor said no such thing." "I'm not saying you're confused all the time," he replied, glancing at Grace and Rebecca. "But maybe you signed something and forgot." There it was. Not an accusation. Something worse. A soft little cage built out of concern. Grace looked at me with fear in her eyes. Rebecca lowered her gaze, pretending sympathy. And for the first time in my life, I realized my son did not need to prove I was wrong. He only needed everyone to wonder whether I was still reliable enough to know the truth. So I picked up my purse, put on my coat, and said, "Then we are all going to the bank." Ethan did not argue. That was what scared me most. The drive to Franklin Union Bank felt longer than it should have. Ethan drove his own truck ahead of us. Rebecca sat beside him, and Grace rode with me because she said she did not want me getting worked up behind the wheel. I knew she meant well. Grace always meant well, but that was part of the pain. She did not understand that concern could feel like an accusation when it came wrapped around doubt. She kept glancing at me from the passenger seat. "Mom," she said softly, "when we get there, just let them explain first. I don't need them to explain something I didn't do. I'm not saying you did it. You're not saying I didn't either." Her face fell. "That's not fair." "No," I said, keeping both hands steady on the wheel. "What's not fair is being asked to prove I know where I was this morning." Grace looked down at her hands. For a moment, I saw her as a little girl again, sitting in that same passenger seat, swinging her feet, asking if we could stop for ice cream after church. Back then, I could fix most things with a napkin, a hug, or a firm word. But grown children bring grown pain. And no mother is ever truly prepared for the day her child looks at her like she might not know her own mind. When we arrived, the bank lobby was quiet, polished, and cold. The floors shone under bright lights. A young teller looked up, recognized Ethan, then quickly looked away. That small movement told me my name had already traveled through the building before I did. Olivia Bennett met us near the front desk. She was in her early 50s, with silver blonde hair pinned neatly at the back of her head, and a navy blazer that made her look more like a judge than a branch manager. She greeted me with professional warmth, but her eyes held caution. "Mrs. Whitmore," she said, extending her hand. "Thank you for coming in. I came because you told me someone used my signature." Ethan stepped beside me. "Mom, let's not start with accusations." I turned to him. "Then stop giving me reasons to make them." Olivia's expression tightened slightly. "Why don't we all step into my office?" Her office had glass walls and a door that did not muffle as much as it should have. I noticed 2 employees glance over as we entered. Ethan noticed too, but unlike me, He seemed almost comfortable. He sat down slowly, crossed one ankle over the other, and folded his hands as if he had prepared for this. That frightened me more than anger would have. Olivia opened a folder on her desk. Mrs. Whitmore, the document submitted this morning, authorized a restructuring of the Whitmore Legacy Investment Account. It did not withdraw funds directly, but it added Ethan Whitmore as a joint management authority, pending final review. Pending final review, I repeated. Yes. Because of the account value, any major access change requires internal verification. That is why I called. How much is in that account? Olivia glanced at Ethan, then back at me. Approximately $1.8 million. Grace inhaled sharply. Rebecca reached for Ethan's hand. I stared at the folder as if it were something alive. That account was built by my husband and me over 40 years, I said. No one touches it without my permission. Olivia nodded. Understood. Then she slid a copy of the document across the desk. My stomach turned before I even touched it. There at the bottom of the page was my name, Aaron Whitmore. The letters curled the way mine did. The A had the same narrow loop. The W leaned slightly to the right. Even the small hesitation mark I sometimes made before the final stroke was there. Whoever signed it had not scribbled a careless imitation. They had studied me. For a few seconds, I could not speak. Ethan leaned forward. Mom? I looked at him. Don't. His face hardened, then softened again too quickly. I'm just worried about you. No. You're worried about what I remember. Olivia cleared her throat. Mrs. Whitmore, is it possible you signed this during an earlier appointment? No. Could you have signed a blank authorization page at any point? I felt Ethan's eyes on me. That question opened a door in my memory I did not want to walk through. I remembered Ethan at my kitchen table months earlier with a stack of papers saying he needed a signature to confirm I declined one of his investment offers. I remembered Rebecca handing me a pen with a smile. I remembered refusing to sign anything blank. At least I thought I refused. And that tiny flicker of uncertainty angered me because it was not real uncertainty. It was planted there by pressure, by fear, by the terrible knowledge that someone close enough to know my signature had wanted my doubt more than my consent. I don't sign blank pages, I said. Rebecca spoke for the first time. Aaron, nobody is attacking you. I turned to her. Then why does it feel like everyone came prepared to defend Ethan? Her cheeks flushed. Because he's being accused of a crime? I didn't accuse him. The document did. Ethan stood up, then sat down again. This is getting ridiculous. Olivia watched him carefully. Mr. Whitmore, did you have knowledge of this document before today? No, Ethan said. The answer came too fast. I saw Olivia notice that too. Grace leaned forward. There has to be some mistake. Maybe someone at the bank mixed up the file. Olivia shook her head. The account number, identification record, and signature card all match Mrs. Whitmore's profile. Identification record? I asked. Olivia hesitated. A driver's license was presented. My mouth went dry. My driver's license, a copy of it, yes. I opened my purse with trembling hands and pulled out my wallet. My license was still there. Same place it always was, tucked behind my Medicare card. Then somebody copied it, I said. Ethan rubbed his forehead. Mom, please, listen to how this sounds. I turned slowly. How does it sound, Ethan? It sounds like you believe someone created a fake document, copied your ID, copied your signature, walked into a bank, and somehow no one noticed. Yes, I said. That is exactly what I believe. He looked at Olivia, then at Grace, then back at me with that wounded expression he had mastered since childhood. Or he said quietly, You came in here, signed something you don't remember signing, and now you're scared. The room went still. I felt something inside me break, but not loudly. It was a quiet break, the kind only the person carrying it can hear. My son had not raised his voice. He had not called me a liar. He had done something more dangerous. He had made my age the suspect. Grace whispered Ethan, but she did not say he was wrong. Rebecca placed a hand over her mouth as if she were pained by the whole situation, but her eyes were dry. Too dry. Olivia looked at me. Mrs. Whitmore, earlier, your son mentioned a fall. I laughed once, not because anything was funny, but because grief sometimes comes out wearing the wrong face. I slipped on my porch last December, I said. I bruised my hip and needed 6 stitches near my temple. I did not lose my mind. No one said you did, Ethan replied. You didn't have to. Olivia folded her hands on the desk. Mrs. Whitmore, for your protection and for the bank's, I am placing a temporary freeze on any authority changes to the account until this is reviewed. Good, I said. Ethan's jaw tightened. Is that necessary? Olivia's eyes moved to him. Yes. That one word gave me the first breath of relief I had felt all day. But relief did not last long. Olivia continued. The issue is the signature. It is extremely close to your verified signature card. Mrs. Whitmore, without further evidence, this may become complicated. Olivia continued. The issue is the signature. It is extremely close to your verified signature card, Mrs. Whitmore. Without further evidence, this may become complicated. Then we get further evidence, I said. Ethan sighed. Mom, do you hear yourself? Yes, I said. Clearly. That seems to bother you. He leaned back, his face darkening. I have done everything for this family since Dad died. I stared at him. You mean since your father died and left me with something you wanted? Grace gasped. Rebecca said my name sharply, as if I had crossed a line. But I was done protecting everyone from the truth while they stood there dressing suspicion as concern. Olivia closed the folder. There is one more thing. We all looked at her. Our lobby and signing rooms are recorded. The document was signed at 9:42 this morning in consultation room 3. We should have footage. My heart slammed once against my ribs. Ethan went very still. Not surprised, not relieved. Still, Olivia continued. I will need to request the footage from security, but until then, no changes will be processed. For the first time since we arrived, I looked directly at my son and saw fear hiding behind his calm. And that was when I knew the signature was not the only thing that had been forged. That night, I did not sleep. I sat at my kitchen table long after everyone had gone home, staring at the folder Olivia Bennett had allowed me to copy. The house was quiet in that hollow way homes become after betrayal enters them. The refrigerator hummed. Rain tapped lightly against the window. The clock above the stove moved forward one small click at a time, as if nothing in the world had changed. But everything had. The paper in front of me looked ordinary. That was the cruelest part. White pages, black ink, legal language, a signature line. No blood on it. No fingerprints visible to the naked eye. Nothing that screamed, this is where your son may have tried to take what your husband spent his life protecting. I ran my finger just above the copied signature without touching it. Aaron Whitmore, my name, my handwriting, but not my hand. I had signed that name thousands of times. School forms, mortgage papers, birthday cards, church donation checks, hospital documents when Charles was sick. I knew the rhythm of it the way I knew the sound of my own breath. Whoever had written that signature knew the shape but not the soul. It was too careful, too practiced. My real signature had a little impatience in it, a slight lift near the end when my hand moved faster than the pen. This one looked like someone had drawn it while holding their breath. Still, I understood why the bank hesitated. It looked close enough to make strangers doubt me, close enough to make my children doubt me. That hurt more than the money. At 8:03 the next morning, I called Michael Harper. Michael had been our family attorney for nearly 25 years. He had helped Charles and me draft our wills, create medical directives, set up beneficiary forms, and organize the investment account that was now at the center of this nightmare. He was in his early 70s, sharp-eyed, soft-spoken, and allergic to nonsense. Charles trusted him completely, which meant I did too. He answered on the third ring. "Aaron." The way he said my name told me he already knew something was wrong. "I need help," I said. "Are you safe?" That question nearly broke me. "Yes," I whispered, "but I don't know who I'm safe from anymore." By 10 o'clock, Michael was at my house with a leather briefcase, reading glasses, and the calm seriousness of a man who had spent his life watching families destroy themselves over paper. He sat across from me at the kitchen table, reviewed the copied documents one page at a time, and did not interrupt while I told him everything. The phone call, the bank, Ethan's calmness, Rebecca's silence, Grace's doubt, the signature, the license copy. The fall Ethan kept bringing up as if a bruise on my head had become permission to question my mind. Michael listened with his hands folded. When I finished, he removed his glasses and looked toward the window. "This was not sloppy," he said. My chest tightened. "So you think it was planned?" "I think whoever did this had access to your identifying information, your signature history, and your family dynamics." "Family dynamics." He looked at me gently. They knew exactly which story people might believe. That sentence settled over the room like dust. Not just forged documents. A forged version of me. A confused widow. An aging mother. A woman too proud to admit she forgot. That was the character someone had written for me, and my own son had been willing to read the lines aloud. Michael tapped the first page. "Did Ethan ever have access to your files?" "Yes. After Charles died, he helped me move some boxes from the den to the upstairs closet. He also borrowed tax records, once said he needed them to help estimate something for my property insurance." "Did he return them?" "I thought so." "You thought so." I closed my eyes. There are moments when memory does not fail you, but trust does. You look back at ordinary days and realize you were not careless. You were loving. You let someone into your home because they were your child. You did not count every paper afterward because you never imagined love required inventory. I didn't check every page, I admitted. Michael nodded once. Not judgment, just fact. Before he could say more, tires crunched in the driveway. Through the window, I saw Ethan's truck. My stomach tightened. Rebecca's SUV pulled in behind him. Michael saw my face. "Were they invited? No. Then let me speak first." Through the window, I saw Ethan's truck. My stomach tightened. Rebecca's SUV pulled in behind him. Michael saw my face. "Were they invited? No. Then let me speak first." But Ethan did not wait to be welcomed. He knocked once and opened the back door the way he had since he was a boy. "Mom." He stepped into the kitchen and froze when he saw Michael. Rebecca came in behind him wearing a cream-colored coat and the kind of concerned expression that had started to make my skin crawl. "Mr. Harper," Ethan said. "Ethan." The two men looked at each other with polite dislike. Rebecca touched Ethan's arm. "Aaron, we just wanted to check on you." "No," I said. "You wanted to see what I was doing." Ethan's eyes dropped to the papers on the table. "So you called a lawyer?" "I called my lawyer." His mouth tightened. "Mom bringing attorneys into this is going to make it worse." "For whom?" Rebecca stepped forward carefully. "For everyone. This family has already been through so much. Maybe we should all slow down before accusations become permanent." Michael looked at her. No accusations have been filed yet. At the moment, we are preserving facts. Rebecca smiled faintly. Of course, but it was not a warm smile. It was the smile of someone adjusting to a new obstacle. Ethan pulled out a chair and sat without asking. Fine, let's talk facts. He reached into a folder I had not noticed and removed several documents. He placed them on the table one after another. Old beneficiary updates, a home insurance form, a healthcare directive amendment, a bank signature card copy, a charitable donation authorization from the church pantry fund. My stomach sank. Where did you get those? I asked. You gave me copies over the years, Ethan said. Every one of these has your signature. Compare them. Michael's expression sharpened. Ethan slid one toward him. Mom's signature has always varied a little. Sometimes the A is looped, sometimes it's narrow, sometimes the W leans. That doesn't mean someone forged it. I stared at my son. He had not come to comfort me. He had come prepared. Rebecca sat beside him, placing a hand over his, like she was steadying him through an unfair trial. Michael studied the papers, but said nothing. Ethan continued. And if we're being honest, Mom has been under stress. Since Dad died, she's been overwhelmed. She forgets appointments. She repeats questions sometimes. I repeat questions when people refuse to answer them, I said. He ignored that. She fell in December. She wouldn't let Grace take her for a full neurological exam. She insists she's fine, but maybe she isn't. Michael looked up. Do you have medical documentation stating your mother lacks capacity? Yeah, ma. Ethan blinked. No, but... Then be careful. The warning was quiet, but it cut through the room. Rebecca leaned forward. Nobody is saying Aaron lacks capacity. We're only S-ing this could be a misunderstanding. Ethan blinked. No, but... Then be careful. The warning was quiet, but it cut through the room. Rebecca leaned forward. Nobody is saying Aaron lacks capacity. We're only saying this could be a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding involving a copied driver's license, Michael asked. Rebecca's eyes flickered. Just once. But I saw it. Michael did too. Ethan shifted in his chair. I don't know anything about that. You seem to know a great deal about everything else I said. His face flushed. Because I'm trying to protect myself. From your mother. From being accused of something I didn't do. His voice cracked through the kitchen. For 1 second, I saw real fear in him. Not grief. Not confusion. Fear. And it made me wonder whether he was afraid of being blamed or afraid of what someone else might say if the truth came out. Michael gathered the documents Ethan had brought and stacked them neatly. I will need copies of these, he said. Ethan hesitated. Why? Because you introduced them, Rebecca answered before Ethan could. Of course, we want everything to be transparent. The word transparent sounded strange coming from her. Michael placed the documents into his briefcase. I will also be formally requesting all bank security footage from the time of the signing, including exterior cameras, lobby cameras, teller line cameras, consultation room footage, and any footage from the parking lot. Ethan looked at the table. Rebecca's lips parted slightly. Parking lot? Michael turned to her. People rarely appear out of nowhere, Mrs. Whitmore. The room went quiet. I looked from Rebecca to Ethan. Ethan was staring at his hands. Rebecca was staring at Michael. For the first time, she looked less like a concerned daughter-in-law and more like a woman calculating distance to an exit. Then Ethan stood abruptly. This is insane, he said. You're treating us like criminals. I am treating this like a crime, Michael replied. Ethan looked at me, and his anger softened into something almost pleading. Mom, please, don't do this. Once you start down this road, you can't undo it. I rose slowly from my chair. Ethan, I said someone walked into a bank with my name, my signature, and my identification. Someone tried to put you in control of money your father left for my security. And yesterday, instead of standing beside me, you told people I might not remember my own actions. His eyes filled, but I no longer knew what those tears meant. So don't ask me not to do this, I continued. Ask yourself why you're so afraid I will. Rebecca stood too. We should go. That surprised me. Not because she wanted to leave, but because Ethan obeyed immediately. At the back door, he turned once more. When the footage comes back, he said quietly, I hope you're ready for what it shows. After they left, I remained standing in the kitchen, one hand gripping the back of a chair. Michael waited until the sound of their cars faded. Then he said, Aaron, I need you to listen carefully. I turned to him. Ethan may be involved, but I am not convinced he acted alone. A cold feeling moved through me. You mean Rebecca? I mean, someone in that room reacted very strongly to the idea of parking lot footage. I looked at the empty doorway where my son and daughter-in-law had stood. For years, I had worried Ethan might lose his business. I had never imagined he might lose himself. Michael picked up his briefcase. The bank said it may take a few days to extract the footage. Yes, then those few days matter. Do not sign anything. Do not hand over any documents. Do not meet Ethan or Rebecca alone. And if anything in your house feels out of place, call me before touching it. After he left, I went upstairs to the closet where Charles and I kept our old records. The metal file box was still there, but the small envelope labeled signature cards and IDs was not. I stood in that closet with my hand against the shelf, staring at the empty space where trust used to be. For 3 days, my house no longer felt like mine. Every sound made me turn my head. Every passing car slowed my breathing. Every drawer I opened carried the quiet fear that something else would be missing. I had lived in that home for decades, but suddenly I moved through it like a guest in a place someone had already searched. The missing envelope stayed in my mind. Signature cards and IDs. Charles had labeled it in his neat block handwriting. Inside had been copies of old driver's licenses, bank signature samples, notarized forms, and photocopies we used when we first set up our estate documents. Not valuable to most people. Not worth anything in a jewelry box or safe deposit box. But to someone trying to become me on paper, it was a treasure chest. I called Michael as soon as I found it missing. He told me not to panic, which is something people say when panic has already walked through the door and taken a seat. Do not search too aggressively, he warned. Take photos of the file box, the shelf, and anything out of place, then leave it alone. So I did. I photographed the closet. I photographed the open metal box. I photographed the empty space where the envelope had always been. Then I stood there in the upstairs hallway, phone in hand, and cried for the first time since the bank. Not because of the money, because I remembered Ethan carrying that box years earlier. Where do you want this one, Mom? He had asked after Charles's funeral. His sleeves rolled up his face, drawn with grief. I had been sitting on the edge of the bed, holding one of Charles's sweaters against my chest, because it still smelled faintly like him. Upstairs closet, I had said. Thank you, sweetheart. He had kissed my forehead. How many betrayals begin as favors? The next morning, Ethan came by again. This time, he brought flowers. Yellow tulips, my favorite. That nearly undid me. He stood on the back porch, holding them like a boy, bringing home an apology before he knew what he had done wrong. His eyes were tired, his jaw unshaven. For a dangerous second, I wanted to believe in him. I wanted to open the door, take the flowers, and let motherhood pull a blanket over everything sharp. But Michael's words echoed in my mind. Do not meet Ethan or Rebecca alone. So I left the chain lock in place. What do you want, Ethan? His face fell when he saw the chain.
Mom, come on. What do you want?
He looked past me into the kitchen.
Can I come in?
No. Pain flashed across his face, but by then I had learned pain could be performed. He lowered the flowers. I hate this. I hate what's happening to us. To us? Yes, to us. This is tearing the family apart. No, Ethan. Someone tried to steal control of my investments.
That is what tore the family apart.
He swallowed.
I didn't steal anything. Then why are you here instead of waiting for the footage?
His eyes shifted to the porch floor. Because once lawyers and bank investigators get involved, things become ugly. Even if it turns out to be nothing people talk. My company can't survive rumors like this. There it was again. His company. Always his company. Your concern is your reputation. My concern is all of us. No. Your concern is what people will know. He pressed his hand against the doorframe. Mom, please, withdraw the complaint, just until we understand what happened. If I withdraw it, there may be nothing left to understand. That's not true. It is exactly true. His voice lowered. You're making a mistake. The sentence was quiet, but it carried a threat in its bones. I stared at him through the narrow opening. When you were little, I said, you used to hide broken things behind the couch. Lamps, picture frames, once even your father's watch. But you always cried before we found them because the hiding hurt you worse than the punishment. His eyes glistened. I don't know where that little boy went, I continued. But if any part of him is still in there, tell me the truth now. For a moment, he looked as if he might. His mouth opened. His fingers tightened around the flower stems. His eyes moved from mine to the chain lock and back again. Then his phone buzzed. He looked down. Whatever message he saw closed his face like a door. I should go, he said. Who was that? No one. No one seems to have a lot of influence over you lately. His expression hardened. You know Rebecca was right. You are impossible when you think you've been wronged. I felt the last soft part of me pull back.
I have been wronged, Ethan.
He turned away, then stopped halfway down the steps. For what it's worth, I hope that footage gives you peace. I looked at his back. Peace doesn't come from footage. It comes from truth. He left the tulips on the porch. I did not bring them inside. That afternoon, Rebecca called. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in me wanted to hear her voice. Not because I trusted it, because sometimes a lie reveals more in tone than truth does in words. Aaron, she said gently, I know Ethan came by. Yes, he was devastated when he got home. I said nothing. He loves you so much. Then he should stop asking me to protect whoever did this. Rebecca sighed. You keep saying whoever like you don't already mean him. I mean, whoever copied my ID used my signature and walked into that bank. Maybe no one copied anything. I sat straighter. What does that mean? I only mean grief does strange things to people, she said. Stress, too. You have been under so much pressure since Charles died. The smoothness of it chilled me. You sound just like Ethan. No, Aaron? Ethan sounds like someone who is scared for his mother. Is that what you told him to sound like? Silence? Only a second. But enough. Then she laughed softly. I think we're all emotional. No, I said. Some of us are emotional.
Some of us are strategic.
Her voice cooled. Be careful, Aaron. There it is. There what is. The real you. Another silence. Then she said, I have done nothing but try to keep this family together. Families don't stay together by burying crimes. You don't know that a crime happened. I know I didn't sign that document. Her voice dropped lower. Knowing something and proving it are not the same thing. The line went dead.
I sat there holding the phone long after she hung up, my pulse beating in my throat. That was not concern. That was warning. By evening, I pulled every financial folder I owned from the den cabinet. I made piles across the dining room table. Bank statements, tax returns, insurance papers. Charles's pension information, old copies of Ethan's business proposals, Grace's school loan records from years ago, anything with a signature, a date, or a connection to Ethan. At first, I found nothing. Then I opened a folder labeled Ethan Construction Loan Declined. Inside were the documents from the first time he had asked me to invest. I remembered that day clearly. He had come with charts, project estimates, photographs of half-built homes, and a promise that I would be helping him protect Dad's legacy. There was also a one-page acknowledgement form. I remembered refusing to sign it because the bottom section was blank, but now clipped behind it was a photocopy I did not recognize. It showed my signature at the bottom of a nearly empty page. My breath caught. I did not remember signing it. More than that, I knew I would not have signed it. There were no terms, no heading, no explanation. Just my name, copied neatly near the bottom. I took a photo and sent it to Michael. He called within 5 minutes. Where did you find this? In Ethan's old loan folder. Do not handle it more than necessary. Michael. I didn't sign this. I believe you. Those 3 words steadied me more than he probably knew. Then he said, this may be a practice document or a copied signature sample. It does not prove who used it, but it supports preparation. Preparation. The word made my stomach twist. After we hung up, I kept searching. Near midnight, tucked inside an old Franklin Union envelope, I found a handwritten note from Charles that I had forgotten existed. Aaron, keep originals separate. Copies can be misused, especially signatures. MH agrees. I pressed the note against my chest. Charles had seen danger in paper long before I did. The next day, Grace came over. She did not bring flowers or warnings. She brought soup, which was her way of saying she was scared without wanting to choose sides. She stood in my kitchen, looking younger than 36. Mom, she said, Ethan called me crying last night. I'm sure he did. He said you won't even speak to him. He spoke to me. He asked me to withdraw the complaint. Grace looked away. He didn't mention that, did he? No. I showed her the missing envelope space, the suspicious blank signature copy, Charles's note, the bank folder. As she looked through everything, her face changed slowly. Not fully. Not enough. But doubt began moving in a different direction. I don't understand, she whispered. Why would Ethan keep pushing if he knew there might be footage? That question had haunted me too. Maybe she thought the footage would not be clear. I don't understand, she whispered. Why would Ethan keep pushing if he knew there might be footage? That question had haunted me too. Maybe he thought the footage would not be clear, I said. Or maybe he believed the person on it would look enough like me. Grace looked at me sharply. What? Before I could answer, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Then something made me answer. Mrs. Whitmore, a woman's voice asked. Yes, my name is Patricia Lane. I used to work at Franklin Union Bank. I probably shouldn't be calling you, but I heard something happened with your account. My hand tightened around the phone. Grace stepped closer. Patricia lowered her voice. A few months ago, your son came into the branch asking very specific questions about signature verification. Not general questions, very specific. My knees weakened and I reached for the counter. What kind of questions? He wanted to know when we compare signatures manually, when we require video review, whether a family member could submit documents on behalf of an elderly parent, and how closely a signature had to match before a transfer got flagged. The kitchen blurred. Patricia continued. At the time, I thought he was helping you with estate planning, but after what I heard yesterday, I thought you deserved to know. Grace covered her mouth. I closed my eyes. There are moments when truth does not arrive like lightning. It arrives like a receipt, plain, dated, undeniable. Thank you, I whispered. Patricia hesitated. Mrs. Whitmore. Yes. There are moments when truth does not arrive like lightning. It arrives like a receipt, plain, dated, undeniable. Thank you, I whispered. Patricia hesitated. Mrs. Whitmore. Yes. There was one more thing. He wasn't alone that day. I opened my eyes. Who was with him? A pause. Then Patricia said, his wife, Patricia Lane's last words stayed in the kitchen long after the call ended. His wife. Grace stood across from me with one hand over her mouth, her eyes wide and wet. For days, she had been trying to stand in the middle, trying to make both sides softer than they were. But the middle disappears when truth steps into the room. Suddenly, there is only what happened and what people are willing to admit. Mom, she whispered, why would Rebecca go with him to ask about signature verification? I set the phone down on the counter carefully because my hand had begun to shake. That is the question, isn't it? Grace looked toward the dining room table where the papers still lay in careful piles. The copied signature, Charles's old note, the bank document, the empty envelope photos. Her face changed again, not into certainty, but into fear of certainty. I thought Ethan was just desperate, she said. I thought maybe he pressured you too hard. Maybe he crossed emotional lines, but this? Her voice broke. I wanted to comfort her. That old mothering instinct rose in me automatically, even while my own heart was being dragged across broken glass. But I had spent too many years protecting my children from consequences until they confused protection with permission. So I said, desperation explains pressure. It does not explain preparation. Grace lowered herself into a chair. I called Michael immediately and told him everything Patricia had said. He asked for Patricia's full name, the approximate date of the visit, and whether she would be willing to provide a written statement. She sounded frightened, I said. Frightened people often know more than they say, Michael replied. But we cannot push her too hard. I'll contact her properly. Michael, what if Ethan and Rebecca already know she called? Then we need to be more careful. Those were not comforting words, but they were honest. By that evening, the atmosphere around the family had shifted. I could feel it even before anyone called. A silence gathered around the phone, the kind of silence that means people are talking somewhere else. Grace stayed with me until dusk. She made tea neither of us drank. Twice she started to say something and stopped. Finally, as she was putting on her coat, she turned back. Mom, I'm sorry. I looked up from the kitchen table. For what? For not believing you immediately? There it was. Not a full confession, not a solution, but the first crack in the wall that had been built around me. I nodded. I know you were scared. I was scared of the family falling apart. No, honey, I said gently. You were scared of admitting it already had, she cried then, quietly, like she was ashamed of the tears. I held her because she was still my daughter, and because love does not vanish just because trust has been damaged.
But even as I held her, I knew something had changed. Grace had begun to see that peace without truth is not peace. It is only silence with better manners. The next morning, Ethan called 7 times before 10 o'clock. I did not answer. Then, Rebecca called twice. I did not answer her either.
At 10:34, a text came from Ethan. "Mom, please don't let lawyers turn this into something it isn't." I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. A second text followed. "You're hurting everyone." That one made me laugh once under my breath. Not because it was funny, because guilty people often call accountability harm. I forwarded both messages to Michael. "Do not respond." He wrote back, so I didn't. By noon, Grace called. "Ethan just called me," she said. "He's furious." "What did he say?" "He said you're collecting evidence against him like he's a stranger." I looked around my kitchen, at the family photographs on the wall, at Ethan's high school graduation picture, at the framed photo of him standing beside Charles in front of his first company truck, at all the proof that he had never been a stranger to me. "That's the problem," I said. "A stranger would not have known where to look." Grace went quiet. Then she said, "Rebecca was in the background. I could hear her telling him what to say." My grip tightened around the phone. What did she say? I couldn't hear all of it. Just something like, "Keep it about her memory." For a moment, my body went cold. Keep it about her memory. Not about the document, not about the copied license, not about the missing envelope, not about why they had asked bank employees how signatures were verified. Make the old woman the problem. That had been the plan all along. Later that afternoon, Michael came by with an update. He had spoken to Patricia. She was nervous, but she confirmed that Ethan and Rebecca had visited the branch together roughly 3 months before the forged document appeared. Patricia remembered them because Rebecca had done most of the talking while Ethan stood beside her, looking uncomfortable. "What did Rebecca ask?" I said. Michael opened his notebook. She asked whether an elderly parent could authorize a family member to help manage investments if the parent was becoming forgetful. My mouth went dry. She used that word, yes. Forgetful. It had not been a spontaneous concern. It had been planted months earlier, watered slowly, and finally brought into the light when they needed it. Michael continued. Patricia said Rebecca asked whether a signed authorization would be enough or whether the bank always required the account holder to be physically present. And what did Patricia tell her? That for major account changes, the account holder typically appears in person or goes through strict verification. I frowned. Then why would they try it? Michael's face tightened. Because the document was signed in person. The room went still. Grace, who had come back after work, looked from Michael to me. But Mom wasn't there. No, Michael said. Someone was. The 3 of us sat in that terrible understanding. For the first time, the shape of the scheme became clearer. Someone had not merely submitted a forged paper by mail or email. Someone had walked into Franklin Union Bank pretending to be me. Someone had shown identification. Someone had sat in consultation room 3 and signed my name while I was at home drinking lemon tea. I felt violated in a way I had no words for. A stranger stealing money is theft. But someone stealing your face, your age, your grief, your handwriting, someone using the trust your husband built and your children inherited, that feels like being erased while still alive. Michael leaned forward. There is more. Patricia also said Rebecca asked whether bank cameras recorded audio. Audio, Grace said. Michael nodded. She was told no, not in private consultation rooms. I looked at him sharply, so whoever came in wouldn't have to sound like me. Exactly. My heart pounded, and if the face wasn't clear enough, Michael finished softly. Then the signature and ID might carry the rest. Grace stood up and walked to the window. This is insane. This is actually insane. No, I said. It is careful. That was what made it worse. Insane would have been messy. This had steps, research, timing, emotional setup. A false story about my memory prepared before the crime ever happened. Whoever planned it knew that the footage might not be perfect. They knew if the signature was close, and the family backed the idea that I was slipping doubt might do the rest. By evening, Michael had submitted formal letters to the bank demanding preservation of all video footage and internal records. He also advised me to file a police report, but I hesitated. Not because I doubted a crime had happened, because once I filed that report, my son would not just be a son in trouble. He would be a possible suspect in a financial fraud case involving his own mother. Michael understood my hesitation. He did not pressure me. He simply said, "Aaron, love may explain why you pause, but it cannot be allowed to destroy evidence." So the next morning, I went to the Columbus police station with Grace beside me. The officer who took my report was kind, but I could tell he had heard many family money disputes before. His pen moved slowly until I mentioned the copied driver's license, then the missing envelope, then Patricia Lane, then the security footage. His posture changed. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, "do you believe your son forged your signature?" I looked down at my hands. A week earlier, I might have defended Ethan before the question was finished. I might have said he was stressed, reckless, proud, but not criminal. I might have protected the boy he had been instead of confronting the man sitting inside the truth. But that boy was not in the room. Only the facts were. "I believe my son knew more than he admitted," I said. "And I believe his wife was involved." The officer wrote that down. Seeing those words become official made my chest ache. When we left the station, Grace took my hand in the parking lot. "I'm with you," she said. I looked at her, searching her face for obligation, fear, pity. But this time, I saw conviction. "Even if it's Ethan," I asked. Tears filled her eyes. "Especially if it's Ethan." That night, the family pressure began. An aunt from Cleveland called to say I should not ruin Ethan's life over a misunderstanding. A cousin left a voicemail saying businesses failed every day and people made mistakes under stress. Someone from church, clearly fed only half the story, sent a message reminding me that forgiveness was a Christian duty. I deleted that one. Forgiveness had become the favorite word of people who did not want truth to cost anything. Then Ethan finally came to the house again. Not alone. Rebecca was with him. Grace was there too, sitting beside me in the living room. Michael had told me not to let them in, but I decided to speak to them through the storm door. Ethan looked exhausted. Rebecca looked composed. That told me everything. "Mom!" Ethan said, "Please, call off the police report." Grace stood behind me. "How did you know she filed one?" Ethan froze. Rebecca answered smoothly, "People talk." Grace stepped closer. "Who talked?" Rebecca's eyes narrowed just slightly. "This is exactly what I mean. Suspicion is poisoning everyone." I looked at my daughter-in-law through the glass. "No, Rebecca," I said. "Suspicion did not poison this family. Someone poured poison, and now they're angry that we can smell it." Ethan's face crumpled. "Mom, I'm begging you." "Then beg with the truth." He stared at me. For one suspended second, I thought he would break. I thought he would say her name. I thought he would tell me who walked into that bank and why. But Rebecca touched his arm. A small touch. A command disguised as comfort. Ethan looked down. "I don't know what you want me to say," he whispered. I stepped back from the door. "Then come back when you do." The next day, Olivia Bennett called. Her voice was tense. "Mrs. Whitmore, We've recovered the initial camera footage. My hand tightened around the phone. And there are visibility issues with the first angle, she said. It may not be enough on its own. I close. It may not be enough on its own. I closed my eyes. Across the kitchen, Grace watched me silently. But Olivia continued. Our security department found a second camera angle from the side hallway. We are still processing that file. My eyes opened. When will it be ready, D? My eyes. Across the kitchen, Grace watched me silently. But Olivia continued. Our security department found a second camera angle from the side hallway. We are still processing that file. My eyes opened. When will it be ready? Soon. And Mrs. Whitmore? Yes. She paused. When it is ready, you may want your attorney present. The next morning, I dressed as if I were going to court. Not because anyone told me to, not because the bank required it, but because I needed armor. And at 69 years old, armor sometimes looks like a navy dress, low heels, pearl earrings, and the good coat your husband once said made you look too dignified to argue with. I stood in front of the bedroom mirror longer than usual. The woman looking back at me had tired eyes, but they were clear. Her hands trembled, but her spine was straight. She was not confused. She was not forgetful. She was not the frail little story someone had tried to write over her life. You are Aaron Whitmore, I whispered to myself. And you know what you did not do. Grace arrived at 9. She did not ask if I was ready. She simply hugged me, then said, Michael is meeting us there. There was comfort in that. Not enough to erase the fear, but enough to keep my legs moving. When we pulled into Franklin Union Bank, Ethan's truck was already there. My stomach tightened. Rebecca's SUV was parked beside it. Grace saw them too. They came. Of course they did. Inside the lobby felt different from the last time. Maybe nothing had changed. The same polished floor, the same quiet counters, the same faint smell of coffee and printer toner. But I could feel the eyes again. Employees glanced up and looked away. A security guard stood near the hallway leading to the consultation rooms. Olivia Bennett came out from behind the glass office door. Her face was professional but pale. Mrs. Whitmore, she said. Mr. Harper is already here, and my son. She hesitated. Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore requested to be present. Given that Mr. Whitmore is named in the document, and because your attorney agreed to a limited viewing, they are in the conference room. Grace's jaw tightened. Limited viewing? Michael appeared behind Olivia before she could answer. It means they may observe the footage, but they do not control the meeting, he said. Then he looked at me. You can still refuse to be in the same room. I looked past him through the glass wall. Ethan was seated at the conference table, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. He looked older than he had a week ago. Rebecca sat beside him, her posture perfect, her coat folded neatly over her lap. She looked less frightened than any innocent person should have. No, I said. Let them watch. Michael studied my face, then nodded. The conference room was colder than the rest of the bank. Or maybe it was just me. A large monitor had been set up at the end of the table. Olivia's laptop was connected to it. Beside her sat a man from the bank's internal security department, a thin, serious-looking person named Mr. Alvarez. No one greeted anyone warmly. Ethan stood when I entered. Mom! I walked past him and sat across the table. Rebecca gave me a small, wounded smile. Aaron! I looked directly at her. Rebecca, her smile faded. Grace sat beside me. Michael took the chair nearest the monitor. Olivia closed the door, and for one brief second, the room was so silent I could hear someone's watch ticking. Olivia folded her hands. Before we begin, I want to state clearly that the account remains frozen. No authority changes have been processed. This viewing is part of our internal review and may also be turned over to law enforcement. Rebecca's hand tightened around the strap of her purse. Ethan stared at the monitor. Mr. Alvarez clicked on a file. The first footage is from the lobby camera at 9:38 a.m. on Tuesday. The screen turned black, then flickered into grainy color. There was the bank lobby. People moved without sound. A teller leaned over a counter. A man in a baseball cap walked toward the exit. Then at the far left of the screen, a woman entered. My breath caught. She wore a beige raincoat and a soft gray scarf. Her hair was short silver gray, styled almost like mine. She walked slowly, not with weakness, but with intention. Her face was angled away from the camera, and a large pair of dark glasses covered her eyes. Grace reached for my hand under the table. "That's not you," she whispered. "No," I said. "It is not." Ethan leaned forward. Rebecca did not move. The woman approached the front desk. A teller greeted her. The woman took something from her purse and handed it over. Identification, most likely. The teller looked at it, typed something, then gestured toward the hallway. The footage jumped to another angle. Consultation room 3. This camera was mounted high near the ceiling. It showed the small round table, 2 chairs, a wall clock, and the side of the woman's body as she sat down. Her face was turned slightly away. A bank employee entered with papers. The woman took a pen. My own name appeared in my mind before she wrote it. Aaron Whitmore. The stranger lowered her hand and signed. Watching someone else sign my name felt like watching someone touch my husband's grave. I could not breathe properly. The bank employee pointed to another line. The woman signed again. She nodded. She slid the papers back. All of it so ordinary. All of it so monstrous. Mr. Alvarez paused the video. Olivia looked at me. "Mrs. Whitmore." "I'm all right," I lied. Michael leaned closer to the screen. "Can you zoom in on her face?" Mr. Alvarez adjusted the image. It blurred, sharpened, blurred again. The woman's face remained partly hidden by the camera angle and glasses. Ethan exhaled sharply, almost like relief. Michael heard it. So did I. Rebecca spoke softly. "It's hard to tell." Grace turned on her. "No, it isn't." Rebecca blinked. "Grace, I only mean the face isn't clear." "The face isn't clear," Grace said. "But that woman is not Mom." Ethan rubbed both hands over his face. "This doesn't prove who did it." I stared at him. "Not Mom. I'm so sorry someone impersonated you. Not, thank God you were telling the truth. Not even, how could this happen? Only, this doesn't prove who did it." Something inside me went very still. Michael leaned back in his chair. "It proves Mrs. Whitmore did not sign the document." Ethan looked at him. "Not necessarily. The angle is bad." "The woman could still be..." Grace slammed her palm lightly against the table. "Stop it." Everyone turned to her. Tears stood in her eyes, but her voice was steady. "Stop trying to make her disappear inside bad camera quality." Ethan looked stunned, as if Grace's loyalty had belonged to him by default, and she had just stolen it back. Rebecca touched his arm. "Ethan, don't." It was the same touch from my doorway. Small, controlled. A warning hidden inside comfort. Michael's eyes narrowed. Mr. Alvarez cleared his throat. "There is more." Rebecca's head turned. He clicked to another file. "This is still from the first camera series, but it captures the hallway after the signing." The woman exits consultation room 3 at 9:49. The video resumed. The woman came out of the room holding her purse close. She kept her head down. She walked toward the side hallway instead of the main lobby. Olivia frowned. "Why is she going that way?" Mr. Alvarez said. "That hallway leads to the restroom and employee exit corridor. Customers sometimes get turned around." On screen, the woman paused near the corner. For half a second, she lifted her face. A blurry profile. Not enough. Not enough to name her. Not enough to catch her. Ethan leaned back, and I saw the smallest change in him. His shoulders loosened. His breathing slowed. He thought the room was moving back in his favor. Then Michael said, "Pause there." Mr. Alvarez paused. Michael pointed to the bottom right corner. "What is that reflection?" Everyone leaned toward the screen. On the polished metal trim of a framed bank notice, there was a faint reflection from the opposite corridor. It showed a narrow slice of the hallway that the main camera did not capture. Mr. Alvarez zoomed in. The reflection became larger, distorted, but visible. A figure stood near the side corridor. Not the woman in the raincoat. Someone else. Tall, male, dark jacket. Head lowered toward a phone. Ethan's face emptied. Grace whispered, "Is that—" Rebecca's chair creaked. Mr. Alvarez shook his head. "Reflection quality is poor. We cannot identify from this alone." But Michael was not looking at the reflection anymore. He was watching Ethan. "Interesting," Michael said quietly. Ethan's voice came out rough. "A lot of men wear dark jackets." "Yes," Michael said, "they do." Rebecca stood abruptly. "This is becoming ridiculous. We came here to see whether Aaron signed, and clearly the footage is inconclusive." "Inconclusive," Grace said. "You just watched another woman sign Mom's name." Rebecca looked at her. "You're emotional." Grace laughed through tears. "I'm finally awake." Olivia raised a hand. "Please, there is still the second camera angle." The room changed. It was as if every person stopped breathing at once. Ethan looked at Olivia. "I thought that was still processing." "It finished this morning," she said. Rebecca slowly sat back down. Mr. Alvarez opened a new folder on the laptop. "This footage is from the side hallway camera. It faces the corridor outside Consultation Room 3 and the entrance to the employee exit area. It does not record inside the consultation room, but it captures customers leaving." Michael turned slightly toward me. "Aaron, are you ready?" "No." "Yes." The video began. The hallway appeared brighter and clearer than the others. The timestamp read 9:49 a.m. For several seconds, nothing moved. Then the woman in the beige raincoat entered the frame. This time, her face was not hidden. Not fully. She looked older, yes. Silver gray wig or styled hair. Glasses now pushed lower on her nose. Same general height as me. Same careful walk. But she was not me. Not even close. Grace made a sound like a sob. I gripped the edge of the table. The woman glanced behind her, and in that moment, the camera caught the shape of her face clearly enough to destroy the lie that had been built around my age, my fall, my supposed memory. Olivia whispered, "Oh my God." Ethan did not move. Rebecca's face went white. The woman hurried down the hall, and just before she reached the side exit, a man stepped into frame from the corner, only for 2 seconds. He did not face the camera fully, but he reached out and took the folder from her hand. The room became silent. Mr. Alvarez paused the footage. The man's face was turned downward, partly hidden, but his profile, his build, the jacket, the watch on his wrist, all of it struck my heart before my mind could defend itself. Grace stood up slowly. Ethan's lips parted, but no words came. I looked at my son across the table. He looked back at me with the terror of a man who had just discovered that silence has a shape, and cameras can catch it. No one spoke for several seconds after Mr. Alvarez paused the footage. The image on the monitor held the room hostage. The woman in the beige raincoat was frozen mid-step, her face clear enough to prove she was not me. Beside her, the man in the dark jacket stood half-turned, one hand reaching for the folder she had carried out of consultation room 3. His face was partly angled down, but the posture was familiar in a way that made my stomach twist. Ethan had always stood like that when he was cornered, one shoulder slightly lower than the other, chin tucked, left hand tense, right hand doing the thing he did when he wanted to look casual but wasn't thumb-brushing over his watch band. The watch. I looked at his wrist across the table. He was wearing it. A silver watch with a dark leather strap. Charles's old watch, the one I had given Ethan after the funeral, because he cried holding it and said, "I just want something of Dad's close to me." On the screen, the man's wrist caught the hallway light. Same shape, same dark strap. Grace saw it too. I felt her stiffen beside me. "Ethan?" she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He shook his head before anyone accused him. That could be anyone. No one answered, because guilty words often arrive before questions do. Rebecca sat unnaturally still. Her lips had lost color. Her hands were folded in her lap, but the knuckles were white. For the first time since this nightmare began, she looked genuinely afraid. Not sad, not concerned, afraid. Michael leaned toward Mr. Alvarez. "Play it forward." The footage moved again. The woman handed the folder to the man. He did not speak, at least not in any way the camera could capture. He took it quickly and stepped back out of full view. The woman adjusted her glasses and walked toward the side exit. The man remained partly hidden by the corner wall. Then for one brief moment he turned. Not fully, but enough. Enough to show the line of his jaw. Enough to show the side of his face. Enough for a mother to know. Grace let out a sob and sat down hard. Ethan stood. "No, that's not." "Sit down," Michael said. It was not loud, but the authority in his voice filled the room. Ethan looked at him, then at me. His face had gone gray. Rebecca reached for his sleeve, but this time he pulled away from her. That small movement told me something had shifted. The partnership between them, whatever it had been, had started to crack under the pressure of proof. Olivia covered her mouth with one hand. She looked devastated, not only as a bank manager, but as a person who understood what this meant. An elderly widow had sat across from her saying she had not signed, and the bank's own process had allowed someone else to come close enough to stealing nearly $2 million. Mr. Alvarez stopped the footage after the man disappeared from frame. "There is one more segment," he said carefully. From the exterior side exit camera, Rebecca's head snapped toward him. Ethan whispered, "Exterior." Mr. Alvarez did not look at either of them. He clicked another file. The monitor showed the side of the bank building. A gray sky, wet pavement, a narrow exit door. The timestamp read 9:51 a.m. The woman in the beige raincoat came out first. She looked around nervously, then hurried toward the parking lot. Seconds later, Ethan stepped out. This time, there was no question. No bad angle. No reflection. No shadows protecting him. It was my son. He held the folder against his jacket, looked once over his shoulder, then walked in the opposite direction from the woman. He did not run. He did not appear panicked. He moved like a man trying very hard to look as though he belonged there. Grace began to cry openly. I heard her, but I could not move. It is a strange thing to see proof of betrayal. Before proof, pain still has somewhere to hide. It can bargain. It can say maybe. It can reach backward into childhood
and pull out every good memory as a defense. But proof is merciless. It does not care what he looked like at age 6 with chocolate on his face. It does not care that he once slept with a toy fire truck. It does not care that he held your hand at his father's funeral. Proof only says, look. And I looked.
I looked at my son leaving the bank with the folder that carried my forged future. Then the woman reached a dark sedan near the edge of the lot. She removed the gray scarf, pulled off the glasses, and took something from her head. A wig. My throat tightened. Underneath her hair was brown streaked with gray at the temples. She was older than Rebecca, but younger than me. Maybe late 50s, early 60s. She looked nothing like me once the costume came off. But inside the bank, with the scarf, glasses, gray wig, and my copied signature, she had been close enough. Close enough for a machine. Close enough for a rushed employee. Close enough for a family already prepared to call me forgetful. The woman got into the sedan and drove away. Mr. Alvarez paused the video on the license plate, though part of it was blurred by rain. We have enough for law enforcement to request vehicle identification, Olivia said quietly. Michael nodded, and enough to establish impersonation. Ethan sat down slowly as if his legs had stopped belonging to him. I stared at him. Who is she? Him. I stared at him. Who is she? His mouth opened, then closed. Rebecca spoke first. We don't know. Every head turned toward her. Michael's expression did not change. Mrs. Whitmore, I would advise you to be very careful. Youth opened, then closed. Rebecca spoke first. We don't know. Every head turned toward her. Michael's expression did not change. Mrs. Whitmore, I would advise you to be very careful. She lifted her chin. I am telling the truth. I don't know that woman. Ethan looked at her. The look was quick, but not quick enough. There it was. The first real fracture. I saw confusion in his eyes. Anger, too. Not at being caught. At being abandoned. Ethan, I said. My voice sounded far away to me. He turned slowly. Who is she? He rubbed both hands over his face. When he lowered them, tears had gathered in his eyes. I don't know her name. Grace made a wounded sound. You don't know her name. I didn't hire her. Rebecca's face tightened. Michael leaned forward. But you knew she would be there. Ethan looked down. The silence answered before he did. I felt Grace reach for my hand again, but I could not feel her fingers. My body had gone numb from the inside out. Ethan, I said, look at me. He did. I had seen him afraid before. As a child, after breaking a window. As a teenager, after wrecking Charles's old truck. As a young husband, when his first child was lost in a miscarriage, he and Rebecca rarely spoke of. But this fear was different. This was the fear of a man standing at the edge of consequences he had spent too long pretending would never arrive. I was told it was just paperwork, he whispered. Rebecca shut her eyes. Michael asked, told by whom? Ethan did not answer. Rebecca stood suddenly. This meeting is over. Olivia rose too. Mrs. Whitmore, please sit down. I will not sit here and be interrogated without counsel. That is your right, Michael said. But the footage will be turned over to police. Rebecca picked up her purse. Her hand was shaking now, just slightly. Ethan looked up at her. Rebecca. She did not look at him. That hurt him. I saw it land. For all his wrong, for all his silence, my son had believed he and his wife were still on the same side. But fraud does not create loyalty. It creates leverage. And leverage disappears the moment survival becomes more valuable. Rebecca moved toward the door. Grace stepped into her path. Did you do this? Rebecca's eyes hardened. Move. Did you hire that woman? Rebecca leaned close enough that I could see the mask slip completely. You should be careful who you blame, Grace. Your mother may not be the only one with documents in this family. Grace went pale. Michael immediately stood. That sounded very much like a threat. Rebecca looked at him and smiled without warmth. It sounded like advice. Then she left. The door closed behind her with a soft click that felt louder than shouting. Ethan remained seated. For a moment, no one followed Rebecca, not even him. He stared at the blank doorway like a man watching the last bridge burn. Olivia quietly asked Mr. Alvarez to make certified copies of the footage for law enforcement and the bank's legal department. He nodded and left the room. The security guard outside shifted closer to the door. Michael sat back down, his voice controlled. Ethan, if you have any sense left, this is the moment to stop protecting lies. Ethan laughed once brokenly. You think I know everything. I think you know enough. His eyes moved to me. Mom. I flinched at the word. He saw it and broke a little more. I didn't forge your signature. I said nothing. I swear to God, I didn't sign your name. No, I said quietly. You just took the folder from the woman who did. His face collapsed. Grace turned away, crying silently now. Ethan pressed his palms to his eyes. I thought if the authorization went through, I could fix the company pay everything back and then explain it later. Explain stealing my control over my own money, I asked. It wasn't supposed to be stealing. What was it supposed to be? He could not answer, because there was no gentle word for it. Olivia looked as though she wanted to leave us alone, but knew she could not. Michael remained still, watching every movement. Finally, Ethan whispered, Rebecca said you would never help me unless we forced the situation. There was the name, Rebecca. Not full truth yet, but a door opening. She said you were sitting on money while my business died. She said Dad would be ashamed of me. She said if we could just get temporary management authority, we could move funds into the company as a secured loan, then return everything before you noticed. My stomach turned. Before I noticed, he looked at me with wet eyes. I know how that sounds. No, I said. I don't think you do. He lowered his head. Michael asked who arranged the woman Ethan swallowed. Rebecca said she knew someone who handled role-play training for corporate events. She said the woman thought it was for a compliance exercise. Olivia's face changed. A compliance exercise? Ethan nodded miserably. I didn't meet her until that morning. I was supposed to wait outside, take the folder after she signed, and make sure it got to the right person. The right person? Michael asked. Rebecca. My hands were cold in my lap. I thought the twist would be the woman, that some stranger had pretended to be me. But the real horror was this. My son had watched the fraud happen close enough to touch it, then came to my house and asked me to doubt myself. I stood slowly. Ethan looked up. Mom, please. I shook my head. Do not call me that right now. He recoiled as if I had struck him. But some wounds need to be felt. I looked at Olivia, turned the footage over to the police. Then I looked at Michael. All of it. Michael nodded. Ethan began to cry, but I walked out before the sound could make me weaker. In the lobby, I paused near the front doors. Rain streaked down the glass, turning the parking lot into a blur of gray and red taillights. Grace came beside me and took my arm. Behind us in that conference room, my son was finally saying pieces of the truth. But the camera had already said enough. The woman who signed was not me. And the man who took the folder was the child I had once trusted with everything. The police found the woman
in the beige raincoat 2 days later. Her name was Linda Foster. When Detective Marcia Coleman called to tell me I was standing in the pantry with a can of soup in my hand, trying to decide whether I was hungry or simply tired. Since the bank footage, hunger had become unreliable. Some days I forgot to eat until Grace appeared with groceries. Other days, I cooked too much because feeding people had once been the way I convinced myself my family was still whole. Mrs. Whitmore, Detective Coleman said we've identified the woman who signed the documents. I gripped the pantry shelf. Who is she? Linda Foster, 58 years old, lives outside Dayton, no criminal record. She works part-time as a corporate training actor. What she's hired by companies to play roles during training sessions. Difficult customer, confused client, angry patient, things like that. For a moment, I could not make the words fit the crime. She was acting. That appears to be her claim. I closed my eyes. Someone had reduced my life, my name, my savings, my husband's legacy to a role, a costume, a scene. Detective Coleman continued. She says she believed she was participating in a financial compliance exercise for a private consulting firm. A compliance exercise? I repeated. Yes, she was told the bank staff involved were aware it was a test. My mind went back to Ethan's broken confession in the conference room. Rebecca said she knew someone who handled role-play training for corporate events. Did she know my name? She was given your name, a signature sample, a copy of identification and instructions on how to behave. My knees weakened, and I sat down on the small stool near the pantry door. She had my IDA copy. Yes, the missing envelope flashed in my mind again. Charles's labeled handwriting, the empty space on the shelf. Ethan moving boxes after the funeral, Rebecca asking questions at the bank. The lie about my memory prepared like scenery before the actress entered the stage. Detective Coleman's voice softened. Mrs. Whitmore, I need to ask whether you're willing to come in later this week. We may need a formal follow-up statement. Yes, I said. Of course. There's more. Ms. Foster is cooperating. That surprised me. She appears shaken. She brought emails, text messages, payment records, and the wardrobe instructions she received. Wardrobe instructions? Yes. Beige raincoat, gray scarf, gray wig, dark glasses, low heels. She was told to study your walking pattern from a video. My breath stopped. A video. We are still looking into that. After I hung up, I sat in my pantry for several minutes with the can of soup still in my hand. A video of me walking. That meant someone had recorded me. At church. At the bank. Outside my own home. The thought made my skin crawl. I called Michael, and within the hour, he was at my kitchen table again, legal pad open, glasses low on his nose. Linda Foster changes the case, he said. How? She can connect the impersonation to whoever hired her. If she truly believed it was a training exercise, she may become one of the strongest witnesses. I stared toward the window. She wore my name like a costume. Michael's expression softened. I know. No, I said quietly. I don't think anyone knows what that feels like until it happens. He did not argue. Later that afternoon, Grace came over and I told her what Detective Coleman had said. She listened silently, then walked to the mantel where our family photos stood. She picked up a framed picture from Thanksgiving 5 years earlier. Charles was still alive then. Ethan had one arm around him. Rebecca stood beside Ethan holding a casserole dish, and I was laughing at something Grace had said. Grace stared at the photo. Rebecca is wearing a beige coat in this picture. I looked up. What? Grace turned the frame toward me. There it was. Rebecca in a beige wool coat,
Not the same raincoat from the footage, but close enough that my mind made the connection before I wanted it to. She always noticed clothes, Grace whispered. She would say things like, "Aaron, that color makes you look elegant," or, "Your gray scarf is so recognizable." I thought she was complimenting you. I thought of all the tiny comments Rebecca had made over the years. My signature pearl earrings, my church shoes, the way I wore my hair, the way I carried my purse tucked close under my arm. Details I had dismissed as politeness now looked like inventory. Grace set the photo down with a trembling hand. "I feel sick. So do I." The next day, Detective Coleman allowed Michael and me to attend a controlled interview after Linda Foster had already given her initial statement. We did not sit in the room with Linda at first. We watched through a glass partition from a smaller observation room at the police station, along with a uniformed officer and another investigator. Linda Foster looked smaller than she had on camera. Without the gray wig and glasses, she was an ordinary woman with tired eyes, shoulder-length brown hair, and nervous hands. She wore a blue cardigan and kept twisting a tissue between her fingers. I had expected to hate her. I wanted to hate her. But the woman sitting there did not look like a mastermind. She looked like someone who had accepted a strange job and only later discovered she had been handed a crime. Detective Coleman sat across from her. "Linda, tell us again how the job was presented to you." Linda swallowed. "I was contacted by email through a booking account I use for training work. It said a private firm needed an actor for a bank compliance evaluation. I've done things like that before. Hospitals, customer service centers, insurance offices." "Who contacted you?" The name on the email was Claire Mason. Michael beside me wrote it down. Detective Coleman asked, "Did you ever meet Claire Mason?" "No, only email and text. The payment came through an online transfer." "How much?" Linda looked ashamed. $5,000. The investigator beside us muttered, "That's high." Linda must have known it too because she began to cry. I should have questioned it. I know that now, but my husband's been out of work and our mortgage was behind. They said it was confidential because it was testing bank security. I thought that explained the money. Detective Coleman slid a printed photo across the table. "Is this what you were asked to wear?" Linda nodded. They shipped the wig and glasses to me. I bought the coat myself and was reimbursed. "Were you told why you needed to look like this?" They said the real client had consented to have her identity used in a training scenario, but she didn't want to appear in person. I was supposed to test whether staff followed procedure. My stomach turned. Consent. Even the lie had used a decent word to cover something rotten. Detective Coleman placed another page down. "Were you given a signature sample?" Linda covered her mouth. Yes. Even the lie had used a decent word to cover something rotten. Detective Coleman placed another page down. "Were you given a signature page down? Were you given a signature sample?" Linda covered her mouth. Yes. Did you practice it? I was told to practice enough that it looked natural. They said the point was to see if the bank would notice small inconsistencies. Sample. Linda covered her mouth. Yes? Did you practice it? I was told to practice enough that it looked natural. They said the point was to see if the bank would notice small inconsistencies. And did you know the account was real? No. Linda's voice broke. I swear to God I didn't know. I thought the documents were fake training forms. Detective Coleman leaned back. But the bank employee processed them. Linda shook her head, crying harder. I thought that was part of the test. Through the glass, I felt my anger change shape. It did not disappear. It moved. Linda had done something wrong. She had signed my name. She had taken money to become me. But the deeper evil belonged to the person who made fraud look like a job. Detective Coleman continued. After the signing, what happened? Linda wiped her face. I was told to leave through the side hallway and hand the folder to a man waiting near the corridor. They said he was the Eva Luator. Had you met him before? Linda wiped her face. I was told to leave through the side hallway and hand the folder to a man waiting near the corridor. They said he was the evaluator. Had you met him before? Detective Coleman showed her a still image from the footage. Is this the man? Linda looked at it and nodded. Yes. Do you know his name? He introduced himself as Ethan. The word moved through me like a blade, even though I knew. Even though I had seen him on video. Hearing a stranger say my son's name inside a police station made the truth heavier. Detective Coleman asked, "Did Ethan say anything to you?" Not much. He seemed nervous. He just said, "You did fine," and took the folder. Michael's pen stopped moving. Detective Coleman asked, "Did anyone else meet you that day?" Linda hesitated. The room seemed to tighten. "Yes," she said. "Who?" "A woman. She was in the parking lot before I went inside. She checked my wig and scarf. She said I needed to look older, more dignified. She was very particular." My hands went cold. Detective Coleman slid another photo across the table. A still image of Rebecca from the bank lobby on another day taken from Patricia's report visit. Linda looked at it for 1 second, then she nodded. That's her. Grace had not come with me that day. I was grateful for that. Some truths are better received sitting down at home than standing behind police glass. Detective Coleman asked, "Did she give you a name?" Linda swallowed. She said her name was Rebecca. Michael exhaled slowly beside me. There it was. Not suspicion, not family intuition, not a flicker in someone's eyes. A witness. A name. Rebecca. The interview continued for another hour. Linda gave them emails, text screenshots, payment confirmations, and a shipping label from the package that had contained the wig and glasses. Most of the accounts were under false names, but Detective Coleman said digital trails rarely vanished completely. Someone had paid. Someone had shipped. Someone had planned. When it was over, Linda asked if she could speak to me. Michael looked at me. "You do not have to." "I know, but I wanted to see her without glass between us." They brought her into a small room where I sat with Michael beside me. Linda entered slowly, as though she expected me to shout. Maybe part of me wanted to. But when she looked at me, her face crumpled so completely that shouting felt useless. "Mrs. Whitmore," she said, "I am so sorry." I studied her face. The face that had been covered by my borrowed age. The face that had almost helped steal my future. "Did you know I was real?" I asked. She cried harder. "No, I swear I didn't. I should have asked more questions. I should have walked away. But I didn't know you were sitting somewhere being hurt by this." That sentence stayed with me. Being hurt by this. Not inconvenienced. Not confused. Hurt. For days, my family had spoken of the accusation, the embarrassment, the business, the reputation, the legal danger. Linda, the stranger who had worn my name, was the first person besides Grace and Michael to name the wound plainly. I looked at her for a long moment. "I cannot absolve you," I said. "That belongs to the law now." She nodded through tears. "But I believe you were used." Her shoulders shook. "And I need you to tell the truth." I continued. "All of it, even when people try to scare you." Linda looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something steadier than fear. "I will." When I left the police station, the air smelled like rain and wet pavement, just as it had outside the bank in the footage. Michael walked beside me without speaking. At the car, I stopped and looked up at the gray sky. Rebecca had not just forged my signature. She had hired a woman to wear my life. But now that woman was no longer a disguise. She was a witness. By the time Linda Foster gave her statement, the story Ethan and Rebecca had built around me began collapsing faster than they could repair it. But collapse is not the same as confession. That was something I learned painfully over the following week. Evidence could pile up like bricks in the middle of the room, and still people would step around it, rename it, explain it away, or point to someone else standing near the rubble. Rebecca did not call me after Linda identified her. Not once. That silence told me more than any apology could have. Ethan called twice, then stopped when Michael sent formal notice that all communication should go through attorneys. I expected that to bring relief. Instead, it brought a different kind of grief. A mother can be furious and still notice the absence of her child's voice. I hated myself for waiting at odd moments for my phone to light up with his name. Grace noticed. "You don't have to pretend you don't miss him," she said one afternoon while helping me sort through more documents. "I don't miss this version of him, but you miss your son." I looked down at a folder of old birthday cards. Ethan's handwriting at age 11. "Happy birthday, Mom. I love you more than pizza." "Yes," I said quietly. I miss who I thought he was. The police investigation moved quickly after Linda cooperated. Detective Coleman obtained the bank footage, Linda's emails, the payment records, the shipping label, and the phone number used to coordinate the job. The name, Claire Mason, appeared everywhere, but no real Claire Mason seemed to exist. The email account had been created only weeks before the fraud. The phone number was prepaid. The payment came through a digital transfer service using a business account with a name that sounded legitimate enough to fool a person in need of money. Compliance Review Partners, LLC. Michael laughed once when he read it. "Too generic," he said. "People think generic names sound official. Who owns it?" That is what they are working to find out. The first answer was disappointing. The company had been formed online using a registered agent service in Delaware. The listed organizer was another shell name. No obvious Rebecca Whitmore. No obvious Ethan Whitmore. Whoever set it up had planned to hide.
Rebecca, I was beginning to understand, did not just lie. She insulated lies. She placed distance between herself and consequences. A fake company, a fake name, a hired actress, a forged signature. A son desperate enough to stand close to the crime, but not clever enough to design it.
I did not say that last part aloud, not at first, because admitting Ethan had been less mastermind than willing participant did not make the wound smaller. In some ways, it made it worse. If he had invented the whole scheme, I could hate him cleanly. But if he had let Rebecca lead him by the hand toward betrayal, then my anger had nowhere simple to land. One evening, Michael came to my house with a stack of printed records Detective Coleman had permitted him to review. "We have a problem," he said. I sat across from him at the dining room table, bracing myself. "Another one. The digital trail does not go directly to Rebecca yet." Grace, who had stopped by after work, leaned forward, but Linda identified her. "Yes," Michael said. "That matters. The footage matters. Patricia's statement matters. Ethan's presence matters. But prosecutors like clean lines, emails, payments, devices, accounts. Right now, the technical evidence points to a fake identity." I felt my hope shrink. So she can deny it. She already is. I looked up sharply. "You heard from her lawyer, not directly. But Detective Coleman told me Rebecca gave a preliminary statement through counsel." I felt my hope shrink. So she can deny it. She already is. I looked up sharply. "You heard from her lawyer, not directly. But Detective Coleman told me Rebecca gave a preliminary statement through counsel." Grace's face tightened. "What did she say?" Michael removed his glasses. "She claims Ethan handled everything." The room went silent. My first feeling was not surprise. It was disgust. "She said Ethan hired Linda. She says Ethan was desperate, emotionally unstable, and obsessed with gaining access to the investment account. She claims she accompanied him to the bank months ago, only because he told her he was worried about your capacity and wanted to understand legal options. Grace stood abruptly. That's a lie. Yes, Michael said, but it is a lie shaped carefully. I looked toward the window where evening light had turned the glass dark enough to reflect my own face back at me. Rebecca had threatened Grace at the bank. Now she was pushing Ethan forward like a shield. And Ethan? I asked. Ethan's attorney has not made a formal statement yet. Is he still protecting her? Michael paused. That is unclear. Those words stayed with me long after he left. That is unclear. So much of motherhood becomes learning to live inside unclear. You do not know whether to call or wait, whether to forgive or hold the line, whether the child you raised is buried under fear, pride, debt, and manipulation, or whether that child grew into someone you simply refuse to see. The next morning, Grace called me from her car. Mom. Rebecca came to my office. I sat straight up in bed. What? She was waiting in the parking lot after my morning meeting. Are you all right? I'm fine. She didn't touch me. But she said I needed to stop poisoning you against Ethan. I closed my eyes. Grace. She said if Ethan goes down, he won't go down alone. Then she said families have secrets, and some people should remember who paid for what. My grip tightened around the phone. Rebecca knew exactly where to aim. Grace had carried guilt for years over the loans Charles and I helped repay after her divorce. It was not shameful. It was family. But Rebecca had a gift for turning help into leverage. Did you report it? I called Detective Coleman. She told me to document everything. Good. Grace's voice shook. Mom, I think Rebecca is scared. She should be. No, Grace said. I mean, scared enough to do something reckless. That afternoon, Detective Coleman called Michael. Then Michael called me. They found something. My heart started pounding. What? The payment to Linda came from Compliance Review Partners, but the account that funded it received a deposit 2 days earlier from another account. That account traces back to a business credit line connected to Ethan's company. I closed my eyes. So, Ethan paid her. Indirectly, yes, but Rebecca could have moved the money. Possibly. We need proof of who initiated the transfer. I rubbed my forehead. How does Ethan's company even still have credit? Barely even still have credit. Barely, Michael said. From what investigators are finding, the company was in worse condition than Ethan admitted. Liens, overdue vendor payment, TS, payroll advances, personal guarantees, Michael said. From what investigators are finding, the company was in worse condition than Ethan admitted. Liens, overdue vendor payments, payroll advances, personal guarantees. How much debt? Michael hesitated. Tell me. More than $800,000. The number seemed to empty the room of air. I had known Ethan was in trouble. I had not known he was drowning with stones tied to his ankles. That evening, I found myself sitting in Charles's old chair in the den, thinking of the first time Ethan said he wanted to start his own business. Charles had been proud, but cautious. Build slowly, he had told him. Debt is easy to invite in and hard to evict. Ethan had laughed. Dad, you worry too much. Charles had looked at me later and said, That boy thinks confidence and planning are the same thing. I wished he were there now. Then I was grateful he was not. Seeing Ethan on that footage would have broken something in Charles that no doctor could mend. 2 days later, Michael asked me to come to his office. Grace drove me. I knew from his voice that the news mattered. Michael's office was in an old brick building downtown with shelves full of legal books that smelled faintly of dust and leather. Detective Coleman was there when we arrived, along with a younger investigator named Paul Reyes. Detective Coleman greeted me gently. "Mrs. Whitmore, we've made progress on the fake identity." I sat down. She placed printed screenshots on the table. These are messages Linda received from Claire Mason. The writing style is formal most of the time, but there are a few unusual phrases. Michael slid one page toward me. I read the highlighted sentence. "Please make sure your appearance feels respectable, not theatrical." The client is older but dignified. My stomach tightened. Dignified? Rebecca had used that word constantly. Erin looked so dignified in navy. Your mother has such a dignified presence. Make her look dignified. Detective Coleman continued. That alone proves nothing. But then we compared the messages to emails provided by Ethan's company, including emails sent by Rebecca CCA when she handled administrative work. Detective Coleman continued. That alone proves nothing. But then we compared the messages to emails provided by Ethan's company, including emails sent by Rebecca when she handled administrative work. Grace leaned in. Another page, same phrase, same punctuation habit. Rebecca used long dashes without spaces. She capitalized client in the middle of sentences when referring to homeowners. She wrote, "Kindly confirm," instead of "please confirm." Small things. Tiny fingerprints made of language. Detective Coleman said, "We also found that the shipping label for the wig and glasses was purchased using an account tied to Rebecca's personal email recovery number." I stared at her. So it was her. "We believe so. We are preparing warrants for device records." Michael looked at me. This is the detail we needed. For the first time in days, I felt the ground beneath me steady. Not joy. There was no joy in this, only the grim relief of truth gaining weight. But Rebecca was not finished. That night, Ethan came to my house, alone. I saw him through the front window, standing under the porch light, rain darkening his jacket. He looked wrecked. Not polished, not defensive, not coached. Just wrecked. Grace was with me. She immediately called Michael, but I surprised both of us by opening the door with the chain still latched. "What do you want, Ethan?" His eyes were red. "She's blaming me," he said. I did not soften. "You helped her." "I know." The words were barely audible. Rain ran down his face, or maybe tears. I could not tell. I didn't know she used company funds to pay Linda. I didn't know about the fake LLC until after. She told me she had a consultant who could push the paperwork through, make it look like you agreed, and then we'd fix everything before you got hurt. Before I got hurt. My voice trembled. Ethan, the first lie hurt me. He bowed his head. She said once the money saved the company, you'd understand. No. She said what you wanted to hear. He looked up then, and the shame in his face was terrible. Yes. Behind me, Grace began to cry silently. I wanted to ask him inside. I wanted to wrap him in a towel and feed him soup and tell him there was still a road back. But the folder from the bank was between us. The footage was between us. Every time he had called me forgetful was between us. So I stayed behind the chain. Tell Detective Coleman everything, I said. His face crumpled. If I do that, Rebecca goes to prison. If you don't, you may go with her. He closed his eyes. For once, he did not argue. When he left, he looked smaller than the man who had stood outside the bank on camera. Smaller than the boy in my memories. Smaller than his own choices. Grace touched my shoulder. Do you think he'll tell the truth? I watched Ethan's truck disappear into the rain. I think I said he is finally realizing that silence will not save him. The next morning, Michael called with the words I had been waiting to hear. Rebecca's phone records came back. I gripped the edge of the table, and she contacted Linda first. She arranged the costume. She created the fake email. She sent the signature sample. I closed my eyes, and one tear slipped free. The evidence had finally converged. Not on a rumor, not on a suspicion, on Rebecca. When Michael said Rebecca had sent the signature sample, I did not feel triumphant. People imagine truth feels like victory. Sometimes it does. But when the truth is ugly enough, it feels less like winning and more like standing in the remains of a house you once called home, holding the match someone else dropped. I sat at my kitchen table after Michael's call, staring at the place where Ethan used to sit on Sunday afternoons. I could almost see him there, rolling his eyes, when I told him to eat more vegetables, laughing when Charles teased him about measuring twice and cutting once. Memory can be cruel that way. It does not step aside just because evidence has entered the room. Grace came over that evening with takeout neither of us touched. So, Rebecca started it, she said quietly. She planned it, and Ethan helped. I looked at her. Yes. Grace wiped at her eyes with the heel of her hand. I keep trying to separate them in my head. Like if Rebecca was worse, then Ethan is less guilty. But that isn't true, is it? No, I said. It isn't. Saying it hurt. It hurt because I wanted a cleaner story. One villain. One victim. One son manipulated beyond recognition. But life rarely gives mothers that mercy. Rebecca had designed the trap, yes. She had found Linda. She had created the fake company. She had turned my age into a weapon and my signature into a tool. But Ethan had known enough to stand in that hallway. He had taken the folder. He had come to my house afterward and asked me to doubt myself. No wife could force a man to do that without some part of him agreeing. The next day, Detective Coleman asked me to come in for an update. This time, Grace insisted on driving. Michael met us there. The detective looked tired but focused, her hair pulled back tightly, a thick file open in front of her. We executed warrants on Rebecca Whitmore's phone and laptop, she said. My hands folded in my lap, and Detective Coleman slid several printed screenshots toward Michael first, then toward me. I saw email drafts, deleted messages, search history, notes typed in a document with headings that made my stomach turn. Client profile, bank procedure, wardrobe, memory concern timeline, memory concern timeline. I touched the edge of the page. What is that? Detective Coleman's jaw tightened. A planning note. It appears Rebecca made a list of moments when she or Ethan could mention your fall, your age, or possible forgetfulness in front of family members and bank staff. Grace made a sound like she had been struck. The list was short but devastating. Mention porch fall at Easter dinner. Ask Grace if Erin repeated herself. Have Ethan express concern, not accusation. Use protect mom language. If challenged, say grief affects memory. I pushed the page away. For a moment, I could not breathe. It had not been one cruel sentence at the bank. It had been rehearsed. The concern in Ethan's voice, the looks Rebecca gave Grace, the gentle reminders that I had slipped on the porch. All of it had been part of a script, and I had been the character they intended to diminish. Grace stood and walked to the corner of the room, pressing her hand against her mouth. Detective Coleman spoke softly. Mrs. Whitmore, I am sorry. Michael's voice was low. Was Ethan aware of this document? We're still determining that. Some notes refer to E handling conversations. Others appear to be Rebecca's private planning, as if a person could privately plan another woman's erasure. Detective Coleman continued. We also found the video used for Linda's walking pattern. It was recorded outside your church pantry. My eyes lifted. The pantry? Yes, approximately 6 weeks before the bank signing. The video appears to have been taken from a parked car across the street. Grace turned around. Rebecca volunteered that day. I remembered it then. Rebecca had shown up unexpectedly at the pantry wearing sunglasses and carrying a box of canned goods she had probably bought on the way. She had hugged me in front of everyone and said, "Aaron, you inspire me. Still serving others at your age. At your age." Even then, Detective Coleman handed over another screenshot. It showed a paused video frame me walking from the pantry door to my car, carrying an empty cardboard box, my gray hair visible in the spring light. I stared at that image of myself through someone else's secret camera and felt exposed in a way I had never felt before. Ethan had not filmed it, at least not according to the metadata. The file had been sent from Rebecca's phone to the fake email account used to contact Linda. Rebecca had not only stolen my signature, she had studied my body, the way I walked, the way I stood, the way I moved through the world, believing I was safe among family. Michael put one hand gently over the page and slid it away from me. "That's enough for now," he said. But Detective Coleman had more. "There are also messages between Rebecca and Ethan." My heart braced. "Do I need to see them?" "You don't have to," she said, "but you should know the general content." I nodded once. Detective Coleman looked at her notes. At first, Ethan appears to resist. He tells Rebecca, "Mom will never agree." Rebecca responds, "Then we stop asking and start managing." Grace closed her eyes. The detective continued. Later, Ethan writes, "This feels wrong." Rebecca writes, "So does losing everything because your mother would rather die rich than help you." The words entered me slowly. Would rather die rich. I had lived carefully so I would not become a burden to my children. Rebecca had turned that care into selfishness. Detective Coleman went on. Ethan later asks, "What if she finds out?" Rebecca replies, "She won't. And if she does, we keep it about her memory." Grace began crying again. Keep it about her memory. The phrase had returned now in writing, no longer overheard, no longer deniable. I stared at the table until the wood grain blurred. And after the signing, Michael asked. Detective Coleman turned another page. Ethan texted Rebecca, "I can't do this." She looked so scared. Rebecca replied, "Do not fold now. You wanted to save your company. Act like it." My breath caught. She looked so scared. So Ethan had seen me. Not just at the bank. Not just afterward. He had seen that I was scared, and still he let Rebecca's plan continue. He let me stand in that conference room being treated like a woman who might not know her own mind. Something inside me hardened not into hatred, but into clarity. Detective Coleman closed the folder. Based on the evidence, we expect charges against Rebecca for identity fraud, forgery-related offenses, conspiracy, attempted theft, and exploitation of an elderly person. Ethan's role is still being evaluated, but he is exposed as well. Exploitation of an elderly person, I repeated. The phrase felt strange, official, heavy. I did not feel elderly until they used my age as part of the crime. Michael looked at me. "Aaron, there will be legal decisions ahead. Criminal charges are not yours to control, but your cooperation matters. Restitution, civil claims, protective measures, those are separate." I nodded, though my mind was far away. When the meeting ended, Grace and I sat in her car for a long time before she started the engine. Rain streaked the windshield again. It seemed every terrible truth in this story arrived with rain. Grace finally said, "I hate her." I looked at my daughter. Her face was wet, her jaw clenched with a rage I had rarely seen in her. "No, you don't," I said softly. "Yes, I do. You hate what she did." "That's enough." "Maybe today it is." Grace gripped the steering wheel. "She tried to make us think you were losing yourself." "I know, and I believed part of it." I reached over and touched her arm. "You were manipulated too. That doesn't make me feel better." "It shouldn't," I said. but it should help you understand where to put the blame." She looked at me broken and ashamed. I should have known. We all think we should have known after the truth comes out. On the drive home, my phone buzzed. "Ethan." Grace saw the name on the screen. "Don't answer." I didn't. A voicemail appeared seconds later. I waited until we reached my driveway before playing it. Grace stayed beside me silent. Ethan's voice came through rough and hollow. "Mom, Detective Coleman showed me the messages. I know you probably saw them too. I don't know how to say this." I kept telling myself it wasn't theft because I was going to put it back. I kept telling myself Rebecca had a plan. I kept telling myself Dad would understand if he knew how bad things were. But Dad wouldn't have understood. He would have been ashamed of me. He paused, and I heard him crying. I knew it was wrong before she ever walked into that bank. I knew. I didn't know every detail, but I knew enough to stop it, and I didn't. I let her turn you into the problem because I was too scared to admit I had become one. Grace covered her mouth. My eyes burned. Ethan continued. "I'm going to tell the detective everything. I don't expect you to forgive me. I wanted you to hear from me that you weren't confused. You weren't forgetful. You were right from the beginning. I'm sorry, Mom." The voicemail ended. For a long time, neither Grace nor I moved. The apology I had wanted was finally there, but it did not heal me. Not yet. Maybe not ever in the way I had imagined, because apology after proof is complicated. It may be real, but it arrives after truth has done the hardest work. Grace whispered, "Do you believe him?" I looked at the dark phone in my hand. "I believe he is sorry." "That's not the same thing." "No," I said. "It isn't." Inside the house, I placed my phone on the kitchen table and stood for a moment beneath the old clock. The same clock that had marked 10:17 the morning Olivia Bennett called. The same kitchen where Ethan had asked for money. The same home where Charles had warned me not to let anyone rush me into signing anything, not even the children. I finally understood that Charles had not doubted our children. He had understood human weakness. That evening, Detective Coleman called again. "Mrs. Whitmore," she said, "Ethan came in with his attorney." My hand tightened, and he gave a statement. He confirmed Rebecca initiated the scheme, but he also admitted he knew the authorization was improper before the signing occurred. I closed my eyes. There it was. Not innocence, not complete guilt. The terrible middle. The place where someone does not create the fire, but holds the door open while it spreads. "Thank you for telling me," I said. After I hung up, I sat alone in Charles's chair and let myself grieve without trying to make the grief noble. Rebecca had been the architect, Ethan had been the accomplice, and I had been the mother who now had to decide whether love could survive the truth without protecting the lie. Ethan's confession did not make the house warmer. For 3 days after Detective Coleman told me he had given his statement, I moved through my rooms like every wall was listening. The truth was out now, or at least enough of it to stop the worst lies. I should have felt safer. Instead, I felt hollow. There is a particular loneliness that comes after being proven right. People think vindication fills you with strength, but sometimes it only confirms that the thing you feared was real. My son had not imagined the scheme. He had not been an innocent man caught in a misunderstanding. He had known the authorization was wrong, and still he had let another woman walk into a bank pretending to be me. Rebecca was the architect. Ethan had opened the door. That was the sentence I kept returning to. On Friday morning, Michael called and asked if I could come to his office for a civil strategy meeting. "This is separate from the criminal case," he said. We need to protect your assets completely now. Grace drove me again. She had become quieter since reading Rebecca's planning notes. My daughter had always believed words could soften conflict. Now she had seen how words could be sharpened into weapons. Michael's conference room smelled like coffee and paper. He had arranged 3 folders on the table: bank, criminal, civil. I stared at the labels. My life had become categories. Michael opened the bank folder first. Franklin Union has confirmed the authority change is void. Your account remains solely under your control. They are also conducting an internal review of how the impersonation passed initial checks. Will my money stay safe there? Yes, for now. But I recommend transferring the investment management to a higher security private client division with additional verification protocols. No in-person changes without a private code direct video verification and written confirmation to me. I nodded. Do it. Grace looked at me with surprise. I had never liked making decisions quickly. But the old version of me had believed caution meant waiting. The new version understood that sometimes caution means acting before someone else acts again. Michael moved to the civil folder. We can pursue damages against Rebecca, Ethan, and possibly Ethan's company if company funds were used. Grace shifted. Against Ethan too. Michael did not look away from me. Erin needs to understand her options. I do, I said. The room went still. Michael continued carefully. Ethan's cooperation may reduce criminal exposure, but it does not erase civil responsibility. He participated. He took the folder. He benefited from the intended transfer. If the plan had succeeded, his company would have received funds. I looked down at my hands that had packed his lunches, hands that had signed permission slips, hands that had held his feverish forehead when he was 7, hands he had nearly replaced with Linda Foster's. What happens if I don't pursue him? Michael sighed. Then restitution may still be ordered through criminal proceedings depending on charges. But financially, you would be choosing not to assert certain claims. Grace whispered, Mom. I raised my hand slightly, not to silence her cruelly, but because I needed room to hear my own thoughts. Rebecca planned to erase me, I said. Ethan let her. Michael nodded. If I treat him like he only made a mistake, I become part of the lie. No one spoke. That was the hardest truth of all. Mothers are praised for mercy so often that people forget mercy without accountability can become another form of denial. I could love Ethan and still refuse to make his betrayal smaller for the comfort of the family. I want full restitution, I said, from anyone who participated. Michael wrote it down. Grace cried quietly beside me, but she did not argue. Then Michael opened the criminal folder. Detective Coleman expects Rebecca will be arrested soon. Ethan may be charged as well, though his cooperation will matter. The prosecutor will likely consider whether he testifies. Against his wife, I said. Yes. The words sat heavily between us. Rebecca had manipulated Ethan, but Ethan had married her, trusted her, followed her, and then stood beside her while she made me look unstable. Now the same woman was preparing to blame him entirely. Their marriage, once presented to me as polished and united, had become a room full of mirrors breaking. That evening, Ethan came to the house again. This time, Michael knew he was coming. Ethan's attorney had requested permission for him to speak with me, not about evidence, not about legal details, but as a son. Michael advised against it at first. Then he looked at my face and said, If you do this, Grace should be present. Keep it short. No promises. So Ethan sat across from me in the living room, where Charles's old Bible still rested on the side table. Grace sat near the window. Ethan looked thinner. His wedding ring was gone. I noticed immediately. He saw me notice. Rebecca moved out, he said. I said nothing. She says I ruined her life. Grace let out a bitter sound. That's rich. Ethan flinched. I deserve that.
No,
Grace said. You deserve worse. He looked at the floor. For a moment, I saw the old sibling dynamic flicker. Grace angry, Ethan ashamed me, tempted to mediate. But I did not step in. Some conversations do not need a mother smoothing the corners. Ethan turned to me. Mom, I'm not here to ask you to drop anything. Good. His eyes filled. I'm here because Detective Coleman asked me when I knew it was wrong. And I answered her. But I keep thinking I need to answer you too. I held myself very still. When Rebecca first brought it up, she didn't say fraud. She said management authority. She said families move assets around all the time. She said you were never going to understand how serious the company debt was because you thought saying no was wisdom. I swallowed. At first, I told her no. I did. But then another creditor called. Then payroll bounced. Then one of my foremen threatened to walk off with half the crew. Rebecca kept saying you had more than enough, and I was going to lose everything because I was too weak to take control. His voice cracked. I wanted to believe her, because believing her made me feel less ashamed. That sentence pierced me in a place anger had not reached, Ethan continued. By the time Linda came into it, I knew it was wrong. I didn't know Rebecca had recorded you at the pantry. I didn't know she had made fake accounts. But I knew that woman wasn't you. I knew the document wasn't honest, and I still stood there. He looked at me then fully. I let her sign your name because I was scared of losing a company I had already lost. Grace turned away crying. My eyes burned, but I refused to let tears rescue him from finishing. Then you came to my house, I said, and told me I might not remember. He squeezed his eyes shut. I know. You watched me fight for my own mind. I know. No, I said, my voice shaking. You don't. You may know the fact of it, but you do not know what it feels like to have your child look at you and decide your age is useful. He began to sob then. Not loudly, not theatrically. He folded forward, elbows on his knees, his whole body shaking. I'm sorry, he said. I'm so sorry. I looked at my son, and for the first time since the bank, I let myself feel both truths at once. He had harmed me deeply. He was also broken. One did not cancel the other. I believe you are sorry, I said. He looked up, hope flickering. But sorrow is not repair. The hope dimmed. I know. You will cooperate fully. You will tell the truth, even if it hurts you. You will make restitution. You will not ask Grace to defend you. You will not ask me to choose between justice and motherhood. He nodded, tears running down his face. And Ethan, I said, you will not come to this house again unless I invite you. That one hurt him most. I saw it, but boundaries are sometimes the only language consequences understand. He stood slowly. At the door, he turned back. Do you think one day you could forgive me? The question entered the room like a child. I wanted to give him something, a maybe, a someday, a mother's small mercy. But I had promised myself no more comforting lies. I don't know, I said. His face crumpled. But if forgiveness comes, I added, it will come after truth, not instead of it. He nodded once and left. Grace sat beside me after the door closed. She leaned her head on my shoulder the way she had as a teenager after her first heartbreak. I'm proud of you, she whispered. I stared at the door where Ethan had disappeared. I don't feel strong, you are. No, I said softly. I'm just finally refusing to be weak for everyone else's comfort. That night,
I placed Charles's old watch box on the kitchen table. The box was empty now because Ethan still had the watch. For years, I had thought giving it to him was a blessing. Now, I wondered whether some gifts become too heavy for people who have not learned how to carry legacy with honor. The next morning, Detective Coleman called. "Mrs. Whitmore," she said, "Rebecca Whitmore has been taken into custody." I closed my eyes. There was no joy, only the sound of a door opening somewhere far away and justice stepping through it. Rebecca's arrest did not happen the way dramatic stories make arrests happen. There were no flashing lights outside my window, no screaming, no officers dragging her across a lawn while neighbors peeked through curtains. Detective Coleman later told me Rebecca was taken into custody outside her attorney's office wearing a camel-colored coat carrying a leather handbag and insisting there had been a misunderstanding. That word again, misunderstanding, as if fraud were just confusion with better shoes. When Michael told me she had been booked, I sat very still at my kitchen table. Grace was across from me, both hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had gone cold. Neither of us spoke for a while. Finally, Grace said, "Do you feel better?" I thought about it. "No," I said, "but I feel less hunted." That was the truth. Better was too generous. Better suggested healing had begun in a clean, steady way. What I felt was closer to standing after a storm and realizing the wind had stopped, but the roof was still gone. 2 days later, the first hearing was scheduled. Michael explained it would not be a trial. It would be an initial appearance bond, conditions charges read into the record procedural language, the kind of legal step that looks small from the outside but feels enormous when your family is sitting inside it. "You do not have to attend," he told me. "I know. Sometimes seeing the defendant in court can be upsetting, Michael." I said I have already seen her wear my life like a costume. I can sit in a courtroom. He did not argue. Grace came with me. She wore a dark green dress and no makeup except lipstick, which told me she had cried before leaving her house. Ethan was there too, seated with his attorney several rows ahead of us. He did not turn around at first, but I knew he felt us behind him. His shoulders were rounded, his hands clasped between his knees. He looked nothing like the confident businessman who used to walk into my kitchen explaining growth opportunities. Rebecca entered through a side door with her attorney. For a second, my body reacted before my mind did. My chest tightened. My palms chilled. I hated that she could still affect me just by entering a room. She looked composed, though thinner than before. Her hair was pulled back neatly. She wore small earrings and a plain navy blouse, as if simplicity might make her look innocent. She did not look at me. That told me she knew exactly where I was. The prosecutor read the charges in a clear, steady voice. Identity fraud, attempted theft, conspiracy, forgery, related offenses, and exploitation of an elderly person. Each phrase landed like a stone dropped into water. Exploitation of an elderly person. I still hated hearing it, not because it was untrue, but because it named a vulnerability I had not chosen. I had not become weak. They had decided my age could be used as a tool against me. Rebecca's attorney entered not guilty pleas on her behalf. Of course he did. That was procedure. Still, the words made Grace's hand tighten around mine. The prosecutor requested strict bond conditions: no contact with me, no contact with Linda Foster, no access to Ethan's company records, surrender of passport-monitored communication. Rebecca's attorney argued she was not a flight risk, that she had deep community ties, that the case was more complicated than the prosecution suggested. Complicated? I almost laughed. People love calling wrongdoing complicated when simple words sound too guilty. Then the judge spoke. "Mrs. Whitmore is to have no direct or indirect contact with Aaron Whitmore, Grace Whitmore, Linda Foster, or any witness connected to the case." For the first time, Rebecca's eyes flicked toward me. Only once,
But I saw hatred there. Not remorse. Not fear. Hatred, as if I had done this to her by refusing to disappear quietly. After the hearing, Michael guided Grace and me into a side hallway to avoid reporters and curious eyes. I had not expected anyone outside the family to care, but financial crimes involving family betrayal carry a strange appetite for gossip. People wanted details. They wanted a villain, a victim, a number, a twist. They did not know that inside every headline is someone's kitchen table, someone's dead husband's warning, someone's child crying in the rain. Ethan approached us near the elevators. His attorney was beside him, but Ethan stepped forward alone. "Mom," he said softly. Michael shifted slightly, but I raised my hand. "It's all right." Ethan looked worse up close. Tired skin, red eyes, a grief that seemed to have aged him more than years ever had. I gave the prosecutor everything he said. The messages, the company records, the transfer approvals, all of it. Grace crossed her arms. "Because it helps you too." He nodded. "Yes." His honesty surprised her. He looked at me. "I'm not pretending it's pure. My attorney told me cooperation matters, but I also did it because it's true." I studied him for a long moment. "Those can both be true," I said. His eyes filled. "I know. For years, Ethan had wanted quick relief, quick loans, quick rescue, quick forgiveness, quick explanations that turned consequences into misunderstandings. Now he was finally learning that truth does not move quickly just because regret arrives late. A week later, we entered mediation for the civil claims. It was held in a neutral office downtown, the kind with beige walls, bottled water, and framed abstract paintings no one actually looked at. Rebecca appeared by video from her attorney's office. She did not want to be in the same room. I was grateful. Ethan attended in person with his lawyer. Michael sat beside me. Grace was there as support, not as a party, but as a daughter who had finally stopped standing in the middle. The mediator began with formalities. Then numbers filled the room. Bank fees, legal fees, investigation costs, security upgrades, emotional distress, potential damages, Ethan's company debt, frozen accounts, civil liability, insurance limits that did not cover intentional fraud. The language was dry. The pain underneath was not. Rebecca's attorney tried to suggest she had acted under pressure from Ethan's failing business. Ethan's attorney countered with records showing her planning. Michael let them speak for a while, then placed one document on the table. Rebecca's memory concern timeline. The room changed. Even through the video screen, I saw Rebecca's expression tighten. Michael's voice was quiet. This was not a desperate wife improvising after pressure from her husband. This was a deliberate plan to discredit a widow's mental capacity so her assets could be accessed without consent. No one interrupted him. He continued. Mrs. Whitmore was not merely targeted financially. She was targeted personally. Her age, her grief, her fall, her handwriting, her clothing, her walking pattern, and her family relationships were all weaponized. Hearing it laid out like that nearly broke me. I looked down at my hands, and suddenly I was back in that bank conference room watching Linda Foster sign my name. I was back at my door with Ethan saying, maybe I forgot. I was back upstairs, staring at the empty space where the envelope had been. The mediator asked if I wanted a break. I shook my head. No, I said. I want to speak. Michael looked at me with concern, but he did not stop me. I turned first toward Ethan. When you were born, I said, your father cried so hard the nurse laughed at him. He held you like you were something holy. And from that day on, everything we built had your future and Grace's future in mind. Ethan lowered his head. We paid for braces, baseball gear, college applications, mistakes you never knew we cleaned up. We gave you love, but we also gave you trust. And trust is not a small inheritance. My voice trembled, but I kept going. When your company began failing, I did not refuse you because I loved money more than you. I refused because I knew throwing my security into your desperation would not save you. It would only teach you that panic had the right to take whatever it wanted. Ethan was crying now. Then I turned to the screen. Rebecca stared back stiff and cold. You did not just try to take my money, I said. You tried to take my credibility. You tried to make my daughter doubt me. You tried to make my son choose theft and call it family. You filmed me outside a church pantry while I was serving people who had less than I did, and you used that video to teach another woman how to become me. Rebecca's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. I want you to understand something, I continued. You failed before the camera ever caught you. You failed the moment you believed age made me weak. You failed the moment you thought grief made me careless. You failed the moment you mistook my love for blindness. The room was silent. Even the mediator looked down. I sat back slowly. Michael placed one hand near mine on the table, not touching, just steadying. After that, the negotiation changed. Ethan agreed to full civil restitution for his role, including repayment of legal and security costs not covered elsewhere. He agreed to liquidate Whitmore Residential Group and direct the proceeds toward restitution. He agreed to provide a sworn statement supporting my civil claims against Rebecca. He agreed not to challenge any protective financial measures. When the mediator asked if I wanted an apology included in the written settlement, I looked at Ethan. No, I said. An apology written by lawyers is not an apology. Ethan flinched, but he nodded. Rebecca refused settlement terms at first. Her attorney muted their video twice. When they returned, she agreed only to partial responsibility. Michael rejected it immediately. The mediator asked whether we would consider a delayed settlement pending criminal proceedings. I looked at Michael. He shook his head slightly. So I said no. Rebecca's eyes flashed. I leaned closer to the screen. I spent too many years teaching my children to clean up what they break. I will not lower the standard for the woman who helped break them. That ended the session. Not with a dramatic confession, not with a hug, not with everyone healed, but with lines drawn clearly. Outside, Ethan waited near the parking garage while Grace went to get the car. I could have walked past him. Part of me wanted to. Instead, I stopped. He looked at me like a starving man who did not expect food. I meant what I said in there. I told him, "You will repay what this cost, not just in money, in honesty. I know. You will not ask me to rush. I won't. You will not use your pain to make me soften the truth." He swallowed. I won't. For the first time, I believed he understood at least the beginning of what repair would require. Grace pulled up, and before I got in the car, Ethan said, "Mom!" I turned. "I sold Dad's watch." The words hit me unexpectedly. "What?" His eyes filled again. "Months ago. To cover payroll. Rebecca told me not to tell you. I told myself I'd buy it back before you knew." For a moment, the parking garage seemed to tilt. Charlie's watch. The one Ethan had worn in the bank footage. The one I thought he still had. "Then, what was on your wrist in the video?" Grace asked sharply from the driver's seat. Ethan looked ashamed. "A replacement, same style, cheaper." I stared at him, and somehow, that small betrayal hurt almost as much as the large one. Not because of the watch itself, but because Charles's memory had become another thing Ethan used as appearance. "You sold your father's watch," I said. He nodded, crying. I closed my eyes. Then I opened them. "Then buying it back is where you start." He nodded again. "I'll try." "No," I said. "You will do more than try." As Grace drove me home, neither of us spoke for several blocks. Then she reached over and took my hand. The court had not ended anything. The mediation had not healed anything. But something had shifted. For the first time, Ethan had not asked me to save him from the truth. And for the first time, I had not tried. 3 months later, the criminal case reached its most important stage. Autumn had settled over Columbus by then. The maple tree Charles planted in our front yard had turned brilliant shades of red and gold, scattering leaves across the lawn every morning. I found myself sweeping them almost every day, not because they bothered me, but because routine reminded me that life continued even when justice moved slowly. The trial itself was shorter than I expected. Rebecca eventually accepted a plea agreement after the prosecution confronted her with overwhelming evidence: Linda Foster's testimony, the security footage, the digital records, the fake company registration, the messages recovered from her devices, and Ethan's sworn statement. She admitted enough to avoid a longer trial. Not enough to ease my heart. The courtroom was nearly empty when the judge accepted her plea. Rebecca stood with her attorney expression carefully controlled. She still looked polished, but something fundamental had disappeared from her posture. Confidence had been replaced by calculation. Even then, she seemed to be measuring the room, searching for a better outcome that no longer existed. The judge read through every charge patiently before announcing the sentence. Probation would not be enough. Restitution alone would not be enough. Because the crime had been carefully planned, involved identity fraud, financial deception, and deliberate exploitation of an elderly victim. The sentence included incarceration, supervised release afterward, financial restitution, and permanent restrictions on handling fiduciary responsibilities. Rebecca listened without expression. Only when the judge mentioned Linda Foster did she finally react. Ms. Foster was manipulated through deception into participating in criminal conduct she did not fully understand, the judge said. That manipulation does not erase her own responsibility, but it demonstrates the calculated nature of the scheme created by the defendant. Rebecca lowered her eyes. She never looked at me, not once. When court recessed, Michael leaned toward me. "It's over." I shook my head. No. He understood immediately. "The criminal case is over," I clarified. "The family isn't." He nodded quietly. Outside the courthouse, Ethan was waiting alone. He had already accepted responsibility for his own role months earlier. Because he cooperated early, provided substantial evidence, admitted his participation before being confronted with all the electronic records, and had no previous criminal history, the prosecutor agreed to recommend reduced criminal penalties. That did not mean he escaped consequences. Far from it. He lost his company. Every construction contract disappeared within weeks after the investigation became public. Suppliers refused credit. Clients canceled unfinished projects. Equipment was auctioned to satisfy creditors. The company Charles had once proudly watched Ethan build disappeared piece by piece. The civil settlement required Ethan to sell nearly everything that remained: his truck, his equipment, his business office, even the small lake cabin he and Rebecca had bought during better years. He stood on the courthouse steps wearing an inexpensive suit that hung loosely on his thinner frame. He looked older than 42. "Mom." I stopped several feet away. "I heard the sentence." "So did I." Silence settled between us. "I sold the last company assets yesterday," he said. "I know." Michael had already informed me. "Your restitution payments have started." "I know. I'll keep paying until everything is repaid." "I expect you will." He nodded. There was no resentment in him anymore, only exhaustion. I found Dad's watch. That sentence caught me completely off guard. "What?" He reached carefully into his coat pocket and removed a small velvet box. My heart stopped. He opened it.
Charles's watch rested inside. The same silver case, the same worn leather strap, the same tiny scratch near the number 6 where Charles had dropped it fixing our porch 30 years earlier. I tracked down the pawn shop, Ethan said quietly. It cost me almost 3 times what I sold it for. I looked at the watch, but did not reach for it. I wanted to bring it home. Home. The word almost broke me. You should keep it, Ethan whispered. I looked up. No. He blinked. It belongs with you. I slowly shook my head. No, Ethan. Confusion crossed his face. It belongs with someone who understands what it represents. He lowered his eyes. I didn't. No. I do now. I hope so. I gently closed the velvet box and pushed it back toward him. Keep it. He looked startled. I can't. You can. But after what I did. Exactly because of what you did. He stared at me. Every morning you put that watch on, I want you to remember your father. Tears filled his eyes. I want you to remember the man who spent 40 years earning trust one honest decision at a time. His shoulders began shaking. And I want you to remember how quickly one dishonest decision can spend an inheritance that took generations to build. He held the watch against his chest. I will. I hope you do. Grace joined us then. She hugged Ethan for the first time in nearly a year. Not because everything had been repaired. Because healing sometimes begins with acknowledging that broken things are still broken. Ethan cried into his sister's shoulder like a child. Grace cried too. I watched them both. Part of me wanted to join them. Another part understood that forgiveness rushed too quickly becomes permission for history to repeat itself. So I remained where I stood, present, loving, careful. Weeks passed. Life slowly became ordinary again. I returned to volunteering at the church pantry. The first morning back, I hesitated before walking from my car to the building. That was where Rebecca had secretly filmed me. That sidewalk had become part of the conspiracy. Linda Foster met me there. She had begun volunteering once a week after completing community service connected to her own role in the fraud. She insisted she wanted to help people instead of pretending to be someone else. When she saw me, she smiled nervously. I wasn't sure you'd want me here. I didn't either, I admitted. She laughed softly. So why did you come? I looked toward the pantry doors. Because if I stop serving people, because someone used that place to hurt me. I smiled gently. Then they steal something else. Linda nodded slowly. I've been thinking about that. What? The difference between guilt and responsibility. I waited. I'm guilty for signing your name. Yes, but I'm responsible for what I do next. I smiled. Exactly. She looked relieved. I've been trying to live that way. I can see that. For the first time since this nightmare began, I truly believed someone had learned something from it. Several days later, Grace invited me to dinner. Only the two of us. Halfway through the meal, she asked the question I had been avoiding. Do you think you'll ever invite Ethan back? I set down my fork. I don't know. You still love him? That has never been the question. She nodded. I know. The question, I continued, is whether he becomes someone I can trust again. And can he? I looked out the restaurant window. Cars passed beneath the evening lights. Couples laughed on the sidewalk. Ordinary life continued around extraordinary pain.
I think trust isn't rebuilt with promises. Grace waited. It's rebuilt with years. She smiled sadly. That's a very mom answer. It's a very old answer. We both laughed quietly. Later that night, I received a handwritten letter. Not an email, not a text. A real letter. Ethan's handwriting looked steadier than it had in months. He wrote that he had accepted a job with another construction company as a project supervisor. No management, no ownership, just honest work. He wrote that every paycheck automatically sent part of his earnings toward restitution before he ever saw the money. He wrote that he attended counseling. He wrote that every morning he wore Charles's watch. At the very end, he included one sentence. I no longer ask whether you'll forgive me someday. I'm trying to become the kind of man worthy of forgiveness, if it ever comes. I folded the letter carefully, then placed it inside Charles's old desk. Not because everything had been fixed, because redemption, unlike fraud, cannot be rushed. It must be earned, one honest choice at a time. As I turned off the light that evening, I realized something unexpected. Rebecca had spent months trying to manufacture an illusion. Fake signatures, fake identities, fake concern, fake evidence. But in the end, the only thing powerful enough to destroy every lie had been something no one could counterfeit. The truth. And now it was up to each of us to decide what kind of life we would build on top of it. 1 year after the bank camera proved the truth, I learned that peace does not return all at once. It comes back in pieces. It came back the first morning I made lemon tea without remembering Olivia Bennett's phone call. It came back the first time I walked into Franklin Union's new private client office without my hands shaking. It came back when Grace laughed in my kitchen again, a real laugh, not the careful kind people use around grief. And it came back one Saturday afternoon when Ethan stood at the edge of my front porch, waiting to be invited in. He did not knock and walk inside the way he used to. He waited. That mattered. I saw him through the window wearing jeans, work boots, and Charles's watch. Not the polished Ethan who once spoke in business plans and borrowed confidence. This Ethan looked tired, humbled, and strangely lighter. A man no longer pretending he was not carrying ruins. I opened the door. Hi, Mom. I stood there for a second, letting the word move through me. Mom. For a long time, that word had hurt. Hi, Ethan. He did not step forward. I brought the receipt. He held up an envelope. For this month's restitution payment. Yes, and the counseling attendance letter. Michael said I could mail them, but I wanted to ask if you'd prefer that from now on. A year ago, he would have assumed access. Now he asked about boundaries. That mattered too. You can leave them on the table, I said. His eyes lifted. Inside, I opened the door wider. Inside, he walked in slowly, like my home was sacred ground. Maybe now he understood it always had been. Grace was already in the kitchen frosting a pound cake for the church pantry fundraiser. When Ethan saw her, his face softened with nervous affection. Hey, Gracie. She pointed the frosting knife at him. Don't call me Gracie unless you're ready to help carry boxes. For 1 second, he froze. Then she smiled. Not a full forgiveness, but an opening. I can carry boxes, he said. You better. I watched them stand in my kitchen together, awkward and careful, and felt my heart ache in a new way. Not the sharp pain of betrayal. Not the burning pain of anger. This was quieter. The ache of something damaged trying to grow around the scar. Rebecca was no longer part of our lives. She was serving her sentence, and after that, she would remain under supervision. Ethan had filed for divorce. Her name was removed from every family document, every emergency contact, every place where trust had once allowed her to stand too close. I did not wish her suffering. That surprised some people. But wishing suffering requires giving someone a room inside your heart. Rebecca had already taken enough space from me. Justice had done its work. The rest was not mine to carry. Linda Foster still volunteered at the pantry. She and I were not friends in the ordinary sense, but we had become something honest. Once a month, she helped organize canned goods and never once asked me to make her feel better about what happened. That was why I could stand beside her. She understood responsibility. Ethan was learning it. He worked for a construction firm now, not as an owner, not as a man giving orders from behind a polished desk, but as a supervisor who arrived early and left with sawdust on his sleeves. He lived in a small apartment across town. He drove an old used pickup with a dented bumper. Every month, part of his paycheck went toward restitution before he touched $1. And every Sunday evening, he wrote me a letter. Sometimes I answered. Sometimes I did not. He never complained. That mattered most of all. On that Saturday, after the pantry boxes were loaded, the three of us sat at the kitchen table with coffee and slices of cake, too warm to cut cleanly. Sunlight came through the window, touching the old burn mark near the stove from Ethan's childhood pancake disaster. He noticed me looking at it. I remember that he said softly, "You almost burned down my kitchen." Grace laughed, and then blamed the pan. Ethan smiled, then his eyes filled. I blamed a lot of things before I learned how to blame myself. The room went quiet. A year ago, silence would have frightened me. Now I let it sit. Ethan looked at me. I know I can't undo it. No, I said. You can't. I know I may spend the rest of my life proving I'm not that man anymore. You might. He nodded. Then I will. I looked at him for a long time. Then I said the truest thing I could. I don't trust you the way I used to. His face tightened, but he did not look away. I know, but I trust what I've seen this year more than what I heard before. Tears slipped down his face. Grace reached across the table and squeezed his hand. I did not say I forgave him completely. I did not know if complete forgiveness was even the right goal. But I had learned that healing does not always mean returning to the way things were. Sometimes healing means building something smaller, slower, and more honest than what existed before. That evening, after Ethan and Grace left, I sat alone in the living room with Charles's Bible beside me and the bank footage still locked away in Michael's files. For months, I had thought that camera saved me because it proved I had not signed. But now, I understood something deeper. The camera did not only reveal who signed the document, it revealed who lied, who stayed silent, who stepped forward, who took responsibility, who used my age against me, and who finally learned that love without truth is only another disguise. I walked to the kitchen and looked at the clock above the stove. The same clock that had marked the beginning of the worst day of my life was still ticking. Steady, faithful, unimpressed by human drama. I smiled. My name was still mine. My home was still mine. My mind was still mine. And my life after everything they tried to take still belonged to me.